Welcome to episode 33 of the Normalist Podcast. My name is Jeffrey Morgan. Love double threes. Yeah.
There's a statistic I saw. You've probably seen it as well. If you publish like 21 episodes or something, you're in the top 1% of podcasters across the world. And I think
Love that. Wow. Congrats. And I was talking about this. I did a group before you this morning, my group, the online group, and we're talking about we think it's so hard to get into this. What Jim Rohn once said was 3% of the world. And I was like, it's not as hard as you think it is because most people dream it, but just don't have the passion, the knowledge, tackling fear, anxiety, whatever it is that comes up for yourself to step into that 3%. And most people stay within that 97% each to them. I'm not here to judge anybody, but you've got more. We've all got more. And congrats, brother. And for me to be 33, I'm wrapped with. I've been seeing a lot of the angel numbers and all of the numbers. And for us, it's to know that I'm 33. It's great, but to know that you've gone beyond that 21 is even better, mate. And congratulations, and keep striving. Look forward to seeing where it takes you, brother.
you were just up in Magnetic Island over the weekend. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing with the Cowboys in their mentorship program.
Yeah, it's more just leadership and I wouldn't say mentorship. It'd be more well-being, and it's just about better choices in NRL clubs and what we do in general. Most people, as I said, 97% of people will take a choice that's the easiest path rather than that of one that's around your goals, dreams, aspirations. And what we get people to do is see things differently through a different lens and perspective. And you'll never be what you can't see is a conversation I'm always having with people. And we start a workshop, they'll tell me, oh, I'm not fussed about money. I'm not fussed about that type of life. But then I take them through and I ask them a bunch of questions, and it basically brings awareness to a situation. And for sporting clubs like the Cowboys or whoever it may be, it makes you think on a different level. You ask around leadership, who's the leader within this group as an example, and most will look at the captain. So what about every other person in that field or in that space? Are you not leaders that can contribute to the cogs turning over as efficiently and effectively as possible? And once we understand that conversation, now we're starting to say, what can I control and what can't I control? The internal versus external. Your body literally is the outline of your body. That's the internal. That's what you control. What someone thinks of me, how the weather shows up tomorrow as an example, or a couple of examples, isn't our business. I just can't control that. And if this weather's bullshit, then I'm starting to feed myself thoughts, behaviors, emotions, beliefs that turn to actions. That stimulus creates an emotion, and usually it's an emotion you don't want. So I always say to people, my name's Jeffrey Morgan. I'm filled with sadness, anger, resentment, envy, want to hang out. No one's going to want to hang out with that person. So don't do that to yourself. Treat that internal around your goals, dreams, aspirations. Be intentional and directional around that every single day. And I promise you end up in that 3% really, really quickly within a year. And it could happen within 3 weeks. It could happen within a year. But in general, if you know what you want, you focus on what you want. You, that person, you put an I in the middle. You are the center of your own universe. I can guarantee that that I internally of what you control is what you live every single day. And someone else's business isn't my business unless it's something, someone was attacking an old person, then I'd step in and have a conversation. But in general, my business is my business. The rest of the world and what they choose to do or not do is theirs. And I'm not here to tell you you're right or wrong around what you've chosen. I am there to bring awareness that there is more to life, and those that want to do that will step into space. Those that most won't, 97% will doubt it. He wants our money, or who's he to tell me? The ego will get in the way. The the self-doubt from past experiences from that individual get in the way. Oh, that person's got an ulterior motive. Why is he doing that? Rather than saying, hey, this person's done it for years upon years. There's a passion behind that. That's who I align with. Let's rock and roll. And the outcome in our group, whether it's the elite coaching mindset group or the actual online program, has been like just priceless, whether it's on a trauma level, elevation level, scaling level, people are just crushing life, and that's those small 3%. We're going to work with those, and we're going to continue to build that, and loving the journey.
So what's the 3% that you keep talking about? Is that where's that statistic drawn from and what it's a relay to?
It's more Jim Rohn. Something Jim Rohn said once upon a time in a thing, and it was one of my greatest inspiration. I think he's probably me personally. I think he's the best speaker of all time, and I just drew a lot from him. And it's not a statistic that, but something that he said years upon years ago. And we've worked with nearly, we're heading towards 1 million people, 900,000 people. And in amongst that, you can share. And I'll give you the greatest example. We live in an age, back when I grew up, there's no access to Harvard or something of that nature, right? An overseas college or university, I should say. In this day and age, you got Huberman as an example. You got Joe Dispenza. You got these people that just you would not have been able to access. Tony Robbins, who's doing videos. Back in the day, you would have paid thousands upon thousands. And if I grew up in an area like Redfern where I didn't have money, those people will be on my wildest dreams. We've got access to those people at our fingertips in this day and age. But the difference between that education and inspiration to actually become a part of your motivation and your life on a daily basis is very minimal. And in those 900,000 people, as much as we get so many through the program, a small uptake towards the knowledge that's shared to becoming knowledge that's actually cared for. And that means that they actually apply that knowledge every single day. They're committed to that journey. And it's a hard one because, I had to build my business, talking about this in the group this morning, over 8 years to say, I'm going to build it to 3-year, 5-year projects with any organization, community, because we realize consistency is important. We go out, do the single talks. Yeah, they were great, but you walk away and people, I wish you came back. Well, guess what? Now we're going to come back for 3 years or 5 years. You get to choose that journey. And we found through that consistency, we've got a better uptake, but in general, we could share that knowledge and only a small percentage will uptake that. So if there's 300 people, you might get 30 people, if that, show up to the session on a regular basis. And we sign up to we do these programs. Start of the year, I had a program start. I had this many people sign up, and I had this many people actually show up on a regular basis. So all this information, education is pointless without application, and that's something, for those that listen to this, turning on Tony Robbins or whoever it is that inspires you, educates you, shares knowledge to elevate your life. You can't scale to another level of life if you don't grab that and then plug that in and build a brick upon another brick until that becomes, your little way towards the penthouse of life that you want. And that's where we sort of sit within society. And that's why that 3% for me after 900,000 people sits very relevant. There's no actual data on the correct amount, but I know it's a small percentage of people who are action takers, innovators, money makers, idea, takers that allow themselves to go from this level to this level. And that small percentage in between is a lot of thought, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of I can't do this, I don't know how to do this. Then you've got to get someone from that 3% to show you what you can't see, so you can be all that you want to be.
And so Sunday sessions, I understand, is a program that's the program you ran this morning.
Yes, every Sunday morning, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. It's an online program. You come into that space. We're chatting everything from business development, personal development, me time, quality of life, these different segments of life, relationships, financials, you name it, we're talking about it, and we're making sure that we're plugging that into the individual. So some people might be really good at training, but they don't have anything financially, nor they've got this crazy dream. And when I sit there and they tell me about their dreams, I'm like, well, that would be unbelievable as a business. We've unpacked that from that person, those that have taken the action and then scaled to a multi-million-dollar business. Now, I'm not going to say that everybody will get that multi-million-dollar outcome, but I know this: if you don't unplug what's in your head, you'll never ever get anything out of life in any way, shape, or form. You aim for nothing, you'll hit every single time. You might as well go out and just see where it takes you. And my biggest thing, people always say, oh yeah, but what about if I put all this? What about if you put passion into yourself? What would happen if you got to the life you want? What would you be doing? Ask yourself that question. Would you travel more? Who would you do it with? Where would you go? Who would you be with? And if that lights you up, I'd be with my partner, my kids, my, whoever it is, right? Yourself. I'd be traveling the world, or I'd be at home, I'd be living by the beach, whatever it is, driving this particular car. And sometimes, the opposite scale of that, as much as that's tangible stuff, the intangible, the feelings, the emotions, the inner peace, the happiness, the fulfillment, being content, whatever it is that you're going to find out of all these actions. I know one thing: if you just never unpack that, you'll never get to where you are. So that group is constantly working on themselves and those elements of life. And then we strengthen all bits and pieces. And the way I describe that, it's like a car. I can undo every nut and bolt in a Lamborghini and it might look beautiful, but it will fall apart. And what we're doing is tightening all those screws within your life: relationships, financials, respect, values, morals, beliefs. And it goes on and on and on, until they have boundaries, until they have definition, until they have a vision, purpose, and why. And now you've got intent every single day when you wake up, and you've got a reason to go into life, and it's a different way of life.
So when you talk about intent, waking up with intent, you talked a little bit about, say, Joe Dispenza and Andrew Huberman and these kind of guys, and how it's really important, listening to the information they put out and the knowledge, but it's about how you go about plugging that into your own life. What kind of learnings or lessons have you used from them, or techniques that you've plugged into your own life, recently?
I'd say to everyone that, and I've got a pad right here, right, as an example. When you're listening to one of these podcasts, grab yourself a pen, pad, and just write out whatever's coming up for yourself from that particular person. And then have a look at that list. There's a whole bunch of writing on there. And then say to myself, all right, what's most important for me right now? And what can I prioritize and put into, my time? I call it your T, what you tee off into, your time, energy, and effort into life. And then you say, for me personally, this is the major priority right now. I'm going to plug that in at 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. every single morning. And it could be training, listening to a podcast. Me personally, I'd rather listen to podcasts where I'm able to write stuff out, because our ability to retain something, you might think at the start of the podcast, oh, that was great. Wade and said, I'm going to remember that. By the end of it, you're like, oh, what did he say again? And how did he say it? So for me, writing that out, then prioritizing that list in a sense of my time, energy, and effort when I tee off. Um, what am I going to give that? Hour of power is an example, something I do with the group. What is in your hour of power? How do you start to implement that? And I'll just do one step at a time. So if you did my hour of power, like with the group as an example, within that hour of power, you could do a whole heap of things. In that hour of power, the idea is try and get 100 things done within the hour. And it could be even just looking in the mirror. Hey, Jeff, I just wanted to tell you, you can do anything that you want. It's a simple, could take you a microsecond to do. Could be making your bed, could be putting rubbish in the bin that's sitting around your home, could be, picking up something, folding your clothes, just being ultra productive. So it doesn't have to be business related. It's just about being productive and proactive and not putting something off, so that you get a skill or something that you can plug into your life, and break it down into its simplest form. Because otherwise, you'll see, if I said, here's what I want you to do today, Hayden, all this stuff, it's a bit daunting, becomes too hard to say, what's the one thing I'll do today so I'll be better tomorrow? And then if you get one thing done, you'll find over time the one thing becomes two things. The two things, it's like running, like a marathon. Hard to run 1K when you first start out. Next thing you're running 2Ks, 4Ks, 10Ks, and so forth. Do the same thing with business and life. Just do one thing at a time until you master and handle the time really well. And now you have it stuck into a position where in an hour you get 100 things done. And people are like, I don't know how you do that. And it's just building up to that over a period of time. Be patient.
Yeah, I think that's it's a more manageable strategy, isn't it? Listen to a podcast, maybe take away one thing that you can learn from that podcast. Another good thing that I use when I'm sitting in the car is I'll use the audio dictate
Love that.
function with Siri. And I guess the benefit of that is you can pause the podcast and
Love that.
paraphrase back to yourself almost what you learned. So if,
Absolutely.
some form of information that Andrew Huberman said about, cryotherapy or cold showers, whatever it may be, paraphrase that statistic back to yourself to understand, I guess, the benefits of it. So it doesn't just go over your head.
Otherwise, you'll just say you're on surface level and you say, "Oh, ice baths are good for your health,"
Yeah.
and we want to dig deeper on that. And I challenge everybody. I call it a layered approach. Go 10 layers deep on a conversation. So if humans having this conversation, big shout out. He should be giving us
She'll
a
be listening.
thing. But in general, mate, he's a great
Yeah.
human being. Go 10 layers deep on that podcast, and I always say by the end of it, I've learned 10 new things, but what are the three most important things out of that? So, and same thing, every single workshop at the end of it, I say to the group, organization, community, tell me three lessons that became blessings within your life from the information shared today. And that way I know people jump in and say, oh, I got X, I got Y, I got Z. And then I know that people were actually engaged in that. And one of the, as you know, if you talk for that period of time without being interactive, most people will switch off. They've got a small time frame, drive through society, 3 seconds, and they'll swipe right to the next story or swipe up to the next thing. Be patient with the stories in front of yourself and actually tune in, listen in, write out, and then act out. And you'll take a thought into an action and you create the reaction you want within your life.
I think the best podcast I've listened to, I've gone back into again. So I've listened to a number of times. If I've missed
Nice.
anybody, if you're listening and you like your podcast, one, I guess, different genre, Equity Mates podcast is another one that I listen to. They've got a couple of good ones and good kind of entry level information for people looking to invest their money in exchange
Love that.
funds and things. And, they might give a few little tips or hints. And I think
Yeah,
going back in, if you miss something, going back in, listening again and really absorbing that information has been handy for me. Yeah.
absolutely. And if you find, like, say, someone's talking about anything, that person that's speaking about something, pause for a moment and say, yeah, type it in because people might say ROI, and I used to sit there and go, what's
What's
a
that? Yeah.
row? Row? Is that a Japanese food? Like literally back in the day, and just type it in. You got to be a champion of being a beginner. I keep saying this, and that means I don't know what that means, or I'm going to look, oh, return of investment. Oh, wow. And then sort of relate it to how you take that and perceive that and then practice that yourself. And what's the return of investment on, what I put out to the world? And I want to make sure that I'm bringing value to that organization so the end outcome and user has the result they want. And once you understand that return of investment, the value and trust is put into you as a business, as a individual, and people will step across the line into that space.
So you just said you're up at Magnetic Island, beautiful, beautiful place. I'm sure you would have,
Terrible.
being a rugby league fan though. You're up there helping the Cowboys. I'm sure you would have loved to be going over to Vegas. That would have been a fantastic experience, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would have been it's a funny story. I could have got over there. Unfortunately, well, I got the invite to get across there, but we had some work on at the time, which was pre-booked, which put us out of that. Next year, I'll just say I had a conversation, and there's every chance I'll be over in Vegas, definitely, rather than being here. But yeah, I'm blessed, and the same thing I just spoke about, that return of investment. That people say, Morgs, you're lucky. It's not luck. It's the more you do something, the more you manifest into a position where people go, Jeff Morgan's your person, Jeff Morgan's your person, Jeff. And now, can you come to Vegas? Can you come to? We did 9 weeks in Europe last year, and it was 256. I still got a post that actually. That should be my post today. 256 locations, which is cities. Sorry, 256 different cities in a year. That's like pretty 365 days, 256. It's pretty hectic when you think about it. And I'm talking about once I post this photo, you'll get an understanding of the locations all across the world, 13 different countries. And we were, I think it was 800 and something, 54 places. So like different visits to places that come up on Google. And for me, that's, that's through design. That's creating value around who you are. Hey, Jeff, can you come to Asia to do this? Hey, Jeff, can you come to New Zealand to do that? Dubai. And we got across, a lot of Europe, and it was unbelievable. So we're able to go into Townsville, but then go and stay at Magnetic Island while we're there. And that's because we've been we've manifested, we've been intentional. And I've always made sure that there was a balance in what we do. I could book myself out every single day, morning, lunch, and dinner. But what time do I have with my partner, myself, my dog, my kids, my grandkids? Yeah, the life that I truly want. Just sitting back and enjoying the sun for 5 minutes. Maybe watching a game of NRL if that's something I wanted to do. And we just did that with to give you context to that, we met these Americans in Paris at a cafe, manifested the conversation, should come to Australia. Yeah, we'll come to Australia. They've just been here for 4 days, and we went to an NRL match, and yeah, that ended up unbelievable. Right at the end, they could have snatched victory, and they loved the game. That is manifestation at its highest degree. And our next location, we're talking about that, which is Helsinki. And we looked it up, home of Santa Claus. We're going to go out and do the igloos and watch the Northern Lights. And that, that intention creates actions that cause reactions in your life. Be that intentional every single day. Otherwise, you don't turn on your GPS to life. And it's crazy. Think of it like there's no one on this planet that travels from A to B. Hey, Hayden, come over to my house. It's at 10 John Street in Sydney. You don't know where you're going, so you turn on your GPS, right? Every single person will do that. Why don't we do it to life? Is the question I want to ask everybody. Why do we just wake up and go, all right, my GPS is to go and pay my bills through this workspace? Is that what life's really about to yourself? And I want to stimulate that thought to everyone. No judgment, but and people go, oh yeah, but I love what I do. What if you could do what you did, but get paid 100 times, 1,000 times more, but have to, instead of putting this much time away from your family, yourself, your partner, your dog, your kids, your grandkids, what if that time was compressed in this? Your value was 1,000 times more, 100 times more, and you could go and spend life the way that you wanted to on Magnetic Island, just like I did. Would you take that opportunity? Everyone would. There's no one person on this planet that would say, because if you've got a passion, you're going to, I'm in front of 3,000 people instead of one person in the same time frame. My money's gone from this to this. The time I've got with my family, those important to me, including myself and the experiences of life, have gone from me being stuck in this location to this. It's a no-brainer. So be intentional and be directional. Turn on that GPS to life and watch what starts to happen. You'll be blown away by how quickly things happen for yourself. But as we spoke about before, application means the inspiration to the life that you truly want. Get out and make it happen. You're worth it.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about was being a proud Indigenous man yourself. Um, the controversy around Spencer Leniu and Ezra Mann. And
Yes,
did you see Mundine's comments, Chock Mundine's comments there on
yes,
social media,
I
and the bit
did.
of
I
back and
did.
forth between Latrell?
I've got a thing. If it's not my business, it's not my business. So I think the biggest thing, and this is like, and everyone can tell me whatever they want. Uh, what people say about me isn't my business. How I respond is the awareness of myself. If we all worked on ourselves, we wouldn't even have those conversations, because what happens is I'm going to say this, I'm going to say that, and now our whole lives are consumed by other people's lives. Oh, what's Hayden doing? I can't believe he's wearing that shirt. Look how he's done his hair. It's not my business how someone does their hair or the way they choose to live. It's my business if that person tries to influence me into that space. Now, if that space is elevation, Tony Robbins says, hey, did you, with your business, if you thought about going this direction, you could actually live the life you want. Well, my ears are going to prick up. But if someone says, oh, did you hear about Hayden? Oh, he got a new tattoo, he thinks he's cool. It's just not my business, brother. Yeah. And I just like, you know, don't waste your time on other people's lives would be my advice. I think your tattoo is pretty cool. I know you got that yesterday, brother. Be nice and numb. Have a look at that, people. Beautiful.
Got to do a shout
Great.
out
Whoever.
to Dante the Ripper.
Yeah, absolutely.
Honor
Beautiful
tattoo,
artwork.
isn't he?
But that's it. That's the thing. And you look at our TV in this day and age, reality TV goes through the roof, because one thing I know with a recent study, 400 times more connection through authenticity. Hence why you get a lot of these reality shows, people are just themselves. But at the same time, Chalk or Latrell's or Ezra's or Spencer's comments just not my business. If I can influence a better um, choice or a pathway of understanding towards culture or why that might be offensive or so forth, then I'm going to do that. But it has to be my space too. So I'm not going to say I'm going to go across there and tell everybody how they should be living. If I'm the expert in the field of what I do, then I'll have that conversation. If they say, "Hey, Morgs, can you come to the clubs and talk about respect or whatever it is?" Beautiful. How do we build respect? What's that look like? What's your culture within that environment, etc., etc.? Do you understand Aboriginal culture? Do you understand Islander culture? How can we fuse that together so that we all sit in a space where we're happy? And the best way to do that is work on yourself rather than other people. Yeah, you're not going to you go out and work for my business, and I'm not going to work for your business. That is in the sense of I'm going to do all your business. Don't worry, Hayden, I got you. I'll do all your work. No one would do that. So we've got to work on ourselves. We don't have to, but if we work on ourselves, we're going to present in an environment in a space where just doesn't become a part of the conversation. The whole conversation on the field is just about football, and yeah, you might give them a nice little eye massage, something of that nature. But just having to say something that you know is going to cost you 8 weeks of your playing career that you love playing in, well, that's damaging for Spencer, and in the end, as much as he might have thought he was saying nothing or whatever was said back to him or started, it wasn't worth the 8 weeks that came from it. And I think that's where we as a society, if we just focus on ourselves, running the ball up and, someone's giving it to you, no doubt you can, it's just going to put you off your game. As soon as you give time to something of that nature, starting to sledge somebody or something, you 50-50 towards playing football and 50% sledging. Put 100% into playing football and see the difference.
Yeah, being a white fella, I was never going to comment on that, but I thought it was a good opportunity to pass it off to you, being a proud Indigenous man. So yeah, I won't comment on that. But I thought you made some really good points there about trying to tune into yourself rather than
100%.
getting out and getting involved in that kind. And I guess for Spencer, he probably looks back on that now and thinks about all the opportunities thrown away now to make a really strong first impression with the Roosters. So I'm sure he's kicking himself, and yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of other people that have.
Imagine the stress from it. Just
Yeah,
imagine that for him, whether it's financially playing every game, he's on match payments as an example, those sorts of things. Just being able to run out the average amount of games for an NRL player is only 45. So technically, he took 8 of those away. He's got 37 left. Technically, I think he's played more than that already anyway. But in general, it just takes away 8 games that you could have played in your career, and it's to run out on that field in front of any fans is a great. Not many people get to do that, and he's lost 8 of those games. How much is that worth? Was it worth the opening our mouth around anything, whatever? It could have been racially, it could have been sexually, it could have been in any way, shape. Just get out and play the game and focus on that. It's like going up to the ref and saying that penalty was bullshit. He's like, yeah, cool. Extra 10 meters. Let's walk down here.
yeah,
And you just cost your team. So it's the same thing. Being able to regulate your emotions, control I want to punch the ref in my head many a times, or tackle the ref myself, give him a nice hip and shoulder. Um, but I know that I'd be banned for life. So you've got to be able to control those emotions. And no matter what someone says to you, that's on them, and that's an insecurity from them. They need to work on themselves. I don't need to do that. Hey, you should be better. I'll let them be better. If I can help them and they want that help, I'll help them out. If they don't, I'll still help them out. I'll cheer for both, and I'll clap just as loud as I do for both that want the help and those that don't want the help, because in the end, it's your choice as to what you'll do. When I talk about being connected to yourself, knowing the direction of your life, having all those elements starting to build strength towards, look, the reality is when you have a realization, shit, I'm not built where I want to be built. That's cool. It's all right. Don't panic. We all start somewhere. I'm still learning. Hayden's still at his point. Someone else is. We're at different points. No comparison. How am I building a better self every single day? relationship, financially, spiritually, culturally, emotionally, psychologically, etc., etc. And when we understand that, and that's a part of our diary, going to the gym, podcasting, reading books, whatever it is on a personal self-development level, then we're in a better position of life. We're moving towards, and that becomes easier for ourselves. But in general, most people don't realize that conversation, and they sit within just this space here. I'm comfortable. It's easy, but what you're doing is you're damaging yourself, because even if I gave you $1 million, okay, I'll give you $1 million. Most people go out and spend it because they just don't know how to invest it. And then even in the sense, I'm going to buy a house. Yeah, great. And it will make you money over a period of time. But how much cash flow do you have on a weekly basis? I don't have any. And I've seen that happen. People buy luxury cars with a amount of money that they got as an inheritance, but then they're borrowing $5 for petrol a couple of months later, because there's no money coming in to actually fuel the Lamborghini or whatever car they end up buying. And it's crazy.
I guess one of the things that I wanted to ask you about what we just spoke about before with regards to Spencer Linew's incident, when you're working with, say, corporate businesses or professionals, say in HR or finance, whatever it may be, their profession is a lot more, I guess you'd be able to say, the decisions they're making are a lot more calculated. They take the time to plan what they're going to say, how they're going to respond via email and so forth, versus someone in Spencer's instance where he's full of adrenaline, sweating, his heart's pounding 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's the first round of the year. I imagine you'd say it's a lot more likely for someone in that instance to say something out of the heat of the moment that they don't mean. What would be your messaging to a professional athlete in that sense versus someone who may be working in business or corporate environments?
The common denominator is human behavior. And if you're practicing that, and even if it's at training, you're ribbing somebody, hey, you dropped the ball, bro. Look, it's your hair. It's too much gel in the hair, brother, or whatever it is. It's going to roll onto another space. So if you don't have respect in this space, you won't have respect in this space. If you don't have discipline in this place, it won't be in this place. Which means, like, it's the same thing. Making my bed every morning. People are like, Morgs, why do you make your bed? Who cares? No one sees it. And I could think that, right? But if I don't have discipline here, what about the discipline in my relationship? It usually rolls over into the next space that you step into. What about discipline towards my own health, life, partnerships, relationships, boundaries within myself? And now I've got an environment that's toxic. And who wants toxic? You want toxic? So we've got to be, and whether it's Spencer or whether it's a corporate, how you practice it, anything is how you do everything. And that means that if you're practicing it over here, when someone says something to you, I want to give them an uppercut to the moon, just like Spencer might have thought in that moment. But at the same time, I'm able to say, I can say it in my head, F this bloke, or whatever it is that I'm saying in my head, but no one knows. And I'm pushing back on the mark and I'm getting ready for the next hit up or whatever it is, or I'm in this corporate space and I'm making sure that I respond because sometimes some people send an email and I'm like, what the F did you
Passive
just
aggressive.
write? And I want to write back and say, you effing idiot, and all of the above, right? True story. We all do. Um, but then I'm like, how can I put it in a way, pause for a moment, slow it down, and it's the patience. Do I have patience in one space? If I do, I'm able to practice it in a space, even on a sporting field, where someone comes across and kicks my leg or whatever it is, or does something that I'm not happy with, and I want to jump up and say, "Are you effing joking?" I jump up and I'm like, and I just walk off in the opposite direction. And I'll leave it with the referee. And if it was bad enough, he'll send him off. If it's in the corporate space, they'll have a word to him. And if they're not going to have a word to him, how can I put it? And I call it seeking to understand in their language. Because if you don't put it in their language, they'll never understand it. And guess what? They're going to repeat on the next process, the same thing. So even with men, I'll give you a great example. domestic violence is huge, and most people don't want to work with. When we talk about domestic violence, we talk about victim protection and all of the above, which I'm with, and I agree with everybody on that. So let me be clear about that. But on the other side, we've got the perpetrator. And I know in jail, people don't do anything with the perpetrator, right? Just so you know that. They don't have to do a course, conflict resolution, anger management, violence prevention. Those courses are available in jail, but they don't have to. They're not compulsory. Um, my biggest thing to everybody out there to understand is I work with those men. And the reason why I do it, because we talk about leadership. Leadership is about building better humans. Better humans means that we're able to seek, or we seek to understand why that person is acting from that space and where that program comes from. So that normal program in this prefrontal cortex is one that they've seen before or been taught before or think that it's normal within the community. I was one of those kids growing up in Redfern. Violence was our first response. And over time I said, wait a second, is violence really serving me? And then showing this to men, we've got people who have been repeat offenders around domestic violence to actually say, hey, wait a second, my first choice is going to be, I'm going to walk away and now I'm going to call Hayden. Hey, Hayden, I'm not feeling good. I've had this with my partner. And then be able to share with them, have you ever thought about it like this? What about what's the actions that you're taking to cause that action, where you then react to the response that they've come out with? And once we do that, we see men who are, their first response is violence, and then that's not a good response. And the biggest outcome, so everyone that watches this doesn't switch off and say, oh, I left this bloke. Understand this, that person now goes back into the community, and it could be your sister, mother, auntie, daughter, niece, that has a better response from that individual, because they'll move from this person to this person, right? They'll go from this person, they were domestic violence here, we've built them better, they moved on to here, and now when they're in that space, it could be your sister. Instead of something bad happening and ending someone's life possibly, now we've got a response where that man says, actually, I respect my partner and I'm listening and I'm learning, what did I do to upset you? How could I respond better? How could I help this situation? And that is leadership at its highest degree. And once we understand that, seeking to understand how people are built, we can shift mental health, we can shift domestic violence, we can shift youth justice, and that's a whole different scenario and ball game. But most people won't do it because we look at the perpetrator like they're a piece of whatever. And I understand the conversation, I do, but if we don't reprogram that, they go back out and maybe they meet your sister, and your sister isn't on this planet. And it's happened many a time. And I'm going to step in that space and start to create leaders by making better choices through an education they never got, role modeling they never saw. And you can't be what you can't see. So let's get out of judgment, seek to understand more, and we'll create a better world and space. And as I said, going back to that whole Spencer Lenu conversation, how you build yourself from the education, knowledge, application, being held accountable to that, is a process journey, different journey for the whole world, a better world.
Yeah, I think people's opinions are very rigid based on their experiences with you, and they don't have fluid perceptions that move as you grow and develop. And I think that's got a lot to do with what we were talking about today. Becoming a reformed individual, well reformed, you've done a complete 180 with your life. You started off in the streets of Redfern on the block, and you got into a life of crime and bank robbery, and it was really easy for you to go down the path of just being a career criminal. Everyone in jail loved you. I understand, as a really well renowned getaway driver and experienced bank robber. But now you've turned your life around, as we spoke about with the lifestyle program, Jeffrey Morgan. And how many contracts do you have at the moment?
We signed 49 last year, which was unbelievable. We went after, to be honest, we went after 5, and we ended up with 49 by the end of the year. It was an unbelievable year. We're heading towards nearly 100 in total, but we've had some. So they've turned into, as I said before, 3-year, 5-year contracts. And it's obviously for us, capability, capacity-wise, just gone through the roof. But it's Yeah, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And I had to seek to understand from myself how you built. Is violence a response? And
Do you
um,
subcontract? Like, do you have other facilitators of the program that you
yes,
subcontract? Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
And when I say they have to be living, breathing, teaching, preaching exactly what we do. So you're looking after your body, you're looking after your thoughts, you're respecting other people, like there's so many elements to the program. Financially, you're secure. All these different conversations. If you're not doing that, and when I say financially secure, you might only when you start out, you have a lot of elements that are really good. We identify that, come in, help them, and teach them different ways. And all of a sudden, even if they had $500, but they start to actually manage their money well, invest it, start to scale that income for themselves and allow themselves to live life. Use 10% to live life. So you don't want to save until you're wrinkly and old and then not even get to spend it. That's happened many a times in stories I've heard over the years. Greatest one was a bloke who worked super hard, husband and wife. They were going to travel Australia, travel the world, gets a couple of weeks out from retirement, gets terminal cancer, dies within 4 weeks. You know, all right, you got to. So anyway, going back to that conversation, and a big respect to that family for letting me share that story. 10% of what you're earning, you're spending, but to be able to do that, you got to know those elements and be practicing it or willing to practice it. And as I said, just be a champion of being a beginner. All right, sweet. I don't know how to do it. How can I learn from that? And whether it's me, Tony Robbins, whoever you're aligning with, practice, put it into application, and watch what ends up coming in your life will be an inspiration to yourself.
Growing up, you and we'll talk a little bit more about the block in a bit more
Yeah.
detail in just a moment, but we talked about, rugby league, and you're a big rugby league fan, I understand, for the Broncos, which I was quite surprised
Yes.
about. I would have thought growing up as a young Indigenous boy in the suburb of Redfern, southern Sydney,
Yeah.
I thought you would have been a Rabbitohs fan, but is there any reason for that? Like the
Funny.
1980s, they were very strong, which I imagine was the time you were growing up.
Yeah, they came in the 80s, and when they came in, they had all the Wally Lewis, Gene
Uh,
Miles, like all these players, and I was like, it's funny. As much as I go for the Broncos, I've always gone for players in a sense. Well, not gone for, but just watching Kalen Ponga or whoever it is, Pappenhausen, or players that are actually carving a Munster. You look at them and you go and watch the game to watch them just run their magic, right? Luai Cleary, even though he won the grand final from, it's unbelievable what they do, and you know, I love watching them play. And the NRL gives you that every week because you've got so many talented players within the, going out and doing it. And funniest thing before that, I didn't even go for South. We lived across the road from Redfern Oval, and I'd go across and there was a goal kicker at the time, player at the time, Neil Baker. He was the goal kicker for South, and you'd get mixed lollies back then. I don't know, 20 cents worth, and it'd be a big bag. You go across and he'd be practicing goal kicks, and the ball would be brown with the white rings around it. That's how old, and he'd be toe poking the ball. Um, and he'd say, and I like, let's have a goal kicking for the banana. Let's go. And he kicked from the sideline. I was a young kid before they trained, and mate, they were really good. Him, Ziggy, and this guy, I'll never forget it. Craig Coleman, and to this day, Craig's and Jeff Finney, sorry, Mario Finney, those players, Les Davidson. You look back on it, and you're like, I was sitting there as a young kid kicking with him, but I never went for South. My dad got me into St George as a kid, believe it or not. So I went for St George before I went for the Broncos. Broncos come in '88, and I transition over, and Alan Lango, Steve Renoff, Darren Lockyer, and even the forwards, Webke, Sivan Asiva, these. So I was just like, man, happy days and never look back. But and I same, I believe that doing their wellbeing and leadership program, the standards that they set, and you look at Penrith, you look at the Broncos. I've been in both their facilities, and just unbelievable standards, and you can see why Penrith have been up there for so long. When you get an internal look at that, um, and same thing, respectfully, professionally, that's something even though I'll go for the Broncos, you'd never even share or think about sharing. But it's just a young kid that came from Redfern bank robber, getaway driver. You look at, and as I said, how you start does not matter. It's the lessons that become blessings, and it's how you finish that matters. And you just got to find what you're passionate about. And for me, it was just human behavior, how we can go from destructive to constructive, messing myself up every single day. And here's the thing, as much as people might go 20 years in jail, bank robber, this, that, and the other, Johnny Killick's helicopter, like, I could tell you so many stories, but I want the people might think that's crazy. I'll tell you what's crazy, Hayden, that people live a life where they don't step into their goals, dreams, aspirations. They're prisoners of their own mindset. They also then, doubt themselves so much that they never ever take action. And what ends up happening, they become so toxic and destructive to themselves. But what they got good at was managing that chaos and calling that life. I'm just going to, I'm happy here, I'll just sit and watch Netflix and eat ice cream. Have you ever traveled? No, I haven't. I'm not fussed by travel. I'm not fussed by this. But then they have kids, and I had this recently. And I asked the person, do your kids want to go to Disneyland? They go, of course, but I can't afford it. I said, so when would that happen in your lifetime? She goes, oh, it'll probably never happen. And I said, well, and it happens. This same question runs over and over. We get comfortable with chaos, and chaos is average. And I don't mean that in a bad way, average around how you perceive the life that you want. I want to go to Disneyland, but you're just accepting this. And when I ran that past that individual, they were like, I'd love to be able to go there, but I've got fear, I've got anxiety of starting this business idea I've got. I know I've got the skill set, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I'm like, you're an expert in this field. If you design that with the guide and the coach that would get you to that point, me personally, I'd get you there within 3 months. That's my vision of it. I've done it over and over. So it'd be about a 3 months transition, and we can start to get you contracts in that space. And what would that do for you to take your kids and be on the plane? And they started crying. And I'm like, that's where we sit. We sit in the bedroom saying, oh, it's okay. I've got my kids around me. Netflix is cool. But your kids are seeing Hayden's kids go to Disneyland going, wish we could go to Disneyland. And they might not ever tell you that, but they're thinking that internally. And love and, being valued and cared for is always going to be the most important thing for your kids. But what if we could do extra stuff like that? What would it be? What would it feel like? And what would your kids, what feelings and emotions would your kids have in that process? And I think there's more to life than sitting in the bedroom eating ice cream, even surrounded by your greatest fans, which is your family, your husband, your wife, your partner, your kids, your dog. There's more to life than just sitting in the bedroom. Go out and live it.
That's a thought you obviously had when you were sitting in prison, down
Absolutely.
in Melbourne. But in the early days, though, you were doing the fitness drills with the Rabbitohs. You were copying them and mimicking them down at Redfern Oval. Is that correct? During their training, and
Literally.
there were signs that you really had that discipline and commitment to do good things. And so I think it was likely, and you'll probably go more into detail on this, but it was likely more so the people you're around, the environment you're around, and less so the innate Jeffrey Morgan that existed inside, and I guess the drive and passion that you had in your soul to play football and do positive things. But I guess when you get swept up in what's the norm, I guess within that where you were at the time, kind of makes it hard, doesn't it, for your growth and development?
It's a great question because my father taught me so much. I ran away at 12 years of age, so people get context to this.
Yeah.
My father was filled with discipline. So to be able to do that as a young kid, what he'd do is left foot kick, right foot kick, 100 on each side. Then let's say there was a bunch of monkey bars. I'll never forget them. There was 9 holes within those, or 9 squares, I should say. And the idea was to hit each of those squares 10 times with your right foot, left foot before I could go home. And I'm talking sometimes it'd be dark and my dad would be like, keep going, keep going. So he taught me discipline, perseverance, commitment, like these values that even when I ran away at 12 was still present. And then to give you context to, and then I'd go across, and obviously those would be at those training drills. I'd look at them, I'd go, and there was a hill at Redfern Oval on the side of the training ground, and you could walk in the oval at that time. No one would stop you. Reggie the Rabbit would be there. And whatever they did on the field, I did on the hill. And I'd run up the hill and do it. And trainers at the time would come over and say, mate, you know, we love what you're doing. Keep doing it, mate. And because who couldn't? You're on the hill doing exactly what they're doing, but in your own version, probably a shorter version than they were running. But I was doing the same thing, up, back, that sort of stuff. That discipline came from my father. But what ended up happening was when I ran away, I got all the habits and rituals of the toxicity, being in the homeless environment.
Yeah.
Now we're in survival mode. I'm thinking about roof, water, shelter, shelter, warm clothes, food, and
Less about
water.
like self-actualization, more so about those basic needs. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and then I became a product of that as well. So you sort of merge those two, and I became later on to where I am today, and it's magical. But back then, you can see why I was so disciplined and so structured from what my father taught me during those formative years. It carried on when I finally came out of destruction and dysfunction into construction, and for me that was the realization that if you can learn something for a period of time, no matter where you go, whether I was in jail, I was still doing push-ups every day. I was still making my bed in jail, and people are like, "Well, what? There's no one watching, brother. Why you make your bed?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, it's a discipline, brother. And that discipline, we spoke about that before, rolled into other stuff. And I just had to realize, relationship wise, I wasn't built well. And it was more about, I had the discipline to show up to the relationship and be nice every day. But underlying, I didn't feel valued by my parents at the time because they for asked me who I wanted to live with at 10 years of age on Redfern Street, Redfern. I didn't feel they loved me, cared for me, valued me. So I was seeking constant validation. And I didn't understand that. I thought discipline was discipline. But in that relationship, I wanted to be validated. So if a girl texts me, oh, yeah, sweet, let's meet up. And I started to cheat on my partner. I was destructive in that sense. And when I finally had the deep dive, was this, and I had the deep dive was when I did it a few times and I sat there crying in my car about the partner that had just left me, and they treated me shit, and I blamed all of them. And they might have done shit things to me, right? They might have treated me, and they did. There was, like, looking back on it, there was a lot of things that they did and didn't treat me well. Doesn't justify me cheating. And how could it remember that Spencer conversation? How could I just build myself better? And what could I do to show up to that relationship? And finally, I started to work on, I don't need to be validated by another girl. I've been in this relationship 4 years and I get the same messages, I get pictures, I get addresses, and man, I just move on because when you know who you are, I don't need the validation from anybody else. When you have a partner that you're committed to, truly committed to, and you know what the word commitment actually means, and those sorts of conversations. Remember, I spoke about building yourself well. I don't have time for anybody else but what I've given my time, energy, and effort to, and that's to my partner, my beautiful partner, Sal. And I'll continue to do that. And that's where we'll fall off the wagon because we just don't have that skill set. I didn't see it with my parents, and there was violence in amongst that. There was, my dad was, there's various other women at home, and when you get older, you realize, shit, wait a second, he was bringing women home while he's with my mum. That doesn't make sense to me, and no doubt, I just saw that as normal behaviour. But now, 4 years in, respectful to my partner, I can still have conversations to females and say, good work, keep going, all of the above, but not with the expectation of, what's your address? I'm coming past, or vice versa. And that's just a beautiful journey, brother.
It seems like there was a lot of self-progression, which was even within you from the start, as I said, about with regards to the training at Redfern Oval. Also, when you were doing a lot of your bank robberies, you talk about how, when you're out and about on the go, you did eat a lot of McDonald's fast food.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
but you were really conscious about your nutrition and healthy eating, and you eventually in prison went on to do some further education. So you did a Bachelor of Nutrition, I think was the name of the degree. Um,
Started as health promotion because nutrition science was very hard to do. Sorry to cut off, but and then transitioning.
but then also making your bed in prison. So there's really these really good attributes about you, which helped you almost get to top level, top grade in the Rabbitohs squad. Do you think that rugby league was a really positive form of escapism for you. And once that was kind of taken away from you, and you were talking about how you're much more focused on fulfilling those innate human needs like water, shelter, food, that kind of thing,
Mm.
you lost that form of escapism, which really um, came down on you like a ton of bricks when you were kind of faced with the realities of life and what it was going to be like for you as a youngster.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think like rugby league was, I never gave it the time that it, if I did, I believe I would have went somewhere with it. I gave it minimal time. I gave it, um, I showed up to training always. I trained very hard when I was there, but I didn't even try, and I was able to get in that space of becoming an NRL player. And I think, and it just shows you if you really dedicate your time to it and put some whatever you go all in on. Um, I just knew that I was. It's funny. I knew that I wasn't being true to myself in that space. Mate, I'd go out committing crimes all night and then show up to training the next day and then stay up all night and go, sleep in the day, go straight to training at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever time it was at that point in time. Um, and I just walked out of training one day and never looked back and didn't have, look, I wouldn't say I didn't have regret. You always think what could have been, but um, I'm not going to beat myself up on what didn't. But I know that if I don't think it was, I gave it enough time to go into that escapism, I suppose, in that sense. I think it was just um, a fleeting potential escape out of the life that I was in. It was huge, and in Redfern, you see a lot of the kids go through that journey and hope that they make South and it gets them out of the badge of honour of going to jail and just being a normal process of that's who we are as Aboriginal people or people growing up in poor socioeconomic areas, Campbelltown, Liverpool, Miller, all these areas that are Redfern, Waterloo, Woolloomooloo, where they're saying, oh, we can't amount to anything. Biggest thing is because we've been around that proximity to, that's what we become. And I had to break that cycle, and to do that, it was one of the hardest journeys. And football gave me a moment of it, but I think I wasn't built good enough. Same thing, boxing. Jeff Fennick was champion at the time. We hung out at Newtown. Johnny Lewis was training Jeff, Peter Matreski. But as young kids, I don't know, we just didn't feel like we were valued. Like, probably had the value on ourselves, to be honest. So I can't walk in there and speak to Johnny. He's famous. Jeff's famous. But knowing Jeff as a good friend now, and training his wife, his daughter, and his daughters, crazily enough, I look back on it and we overthink everything in life, paralysis analysis. I'm not going to walk in there. Jeff's famous for you, mate. Bloke would have spoken to me, but my thoughts stopped me from even walking through the door. And who knows? Maybe I was a world champion boxer if I'd walked through that door. We just don't know. And it's those lessons in this conversation should be follow your dreams. Just walk in that door and tackle that. Like now, I've been able to harness that and say instead of having fear or anxiety, I've got excitement. I'm blessed and grateful by this opportunity. For me, as an Aboriginal person, I Adelaide and say my ancestors fought for me to be here and have conversations of strength for myself, but also for our culture. Um, and changing your language to change the outcome means that your perception on it now isn't fear or anxiety. It's an opportunity. I'm going to elevate my life. I'm going to find happiness, inner peace, or whatever it is that you're doing. And when you shift that language, change your language, you change the outcome. And I can't tell you how powerful that is. Find the right words to step into something rather than away from something. Because as you said, there's so much escapism in my life I was constantly running from without me even realizing. And a lot of society does the same thing. As I said before, 20 years in jail and all those experiences, you think that's crazy. The craziest thing is you're free and you're escaping from your own life. Most people are dead at 25, buried at 75. And when we understand that transition of conversation means that you're just never going to take that opportunity because it's fear and anxiety. Step past that and step into the greatest version of yourself. You never know what will happen.
I've heard that quote on Modern Wisdom. Chris Williamson's Modern Wisdom. They just said that. I think it was who was it? Alex Hormozy, I think.
Yeah,
He said that. It was really insightful too, and I think it's very true.
crazy. Yeah.
Very
Uh,
true. Very true.
when I heard it, it
Very true.
blew me away. It's just, and the first step to that, just so everybody knows, is to identify what you've stepped away from,
Yeah.
and then the second step would be how do you change that? So write out the conversation. Oh, this it's scary to start a business. I've got so much fear. I don't know anything.
Yeah.
And then write I call it the yin and yang. Write the yang or the yin, whatever way you want to look at it. There is a positive and negative aspect of that. Yeah, but in general, write it out and say, for me, it would be a great opportunity. What would it give you? How would you feel? Oh, I can take my kids to Disneyland. I can feel inner peace. I can be fulfilled, or whatever it is that you'll get out of it, tangible, intangible, how you feel something, or something you can never measure or feel. Write that out and say, far out, I'd love to live in that version. But what's stopping me is that fear and anxiety. But writing this out, uh, the opportunities, the happiness, this, and then start to step into it. If you don't know the first step around that journey, then that's where you've got your answer. I need a coach, a guide, a mentor, someone who can put me in that position. That's an investment, not a cost. Know the difference between both. Someone's going to level up your life, open your door in 3 seconds and ask for 300. And you go, that took you 2 seconds. Why am I paying you 300? It was the acquirement of that knowledge that allowed him to or her to do that in that short space of time, that you then say, it's not worth the stress. I'll pay you the 300 bucks. Be that for yourself every single day and watch how magical life becomes.
And what you said there before, you're talking about, making sure that you look at things like the way that you perceive opportunities. So it's like, don't look at things as what could go wrong. You're looking at what could go right by taking that step or taking that risk. And oftentimes,
Absolutely.
more than not, what you think was going to be, flat failure, you find you're good at something and you start working at it, and then I think that's one of the beautiful things for life for me is just trying new things and seeing where your talents and skill sets lie, because if you don't try, you'll never find out. And so, try
Absolutely.
different things when you're young, educate yourself. And what would be kind of like the key things that have helped you, going from bank robber to life coach? What's kind of helped you in that transition? You've said, Jeffrey Morgan, the mindset coach, standing in a room with lawyers, corporates, business
Doctors,
doctors,
business
business owners,
projectors.
um, and being on like Mark Burris's podcast and that kind of thing, and holding conversations with people like that. What's helped you with that transition? Is it just an innate drive to learn more, or is it something where you've had to really manage your own personal limitations and sort of work on those?
All of the above. It's
Yeah.
you got to deep dive yourself, and most people don't want to do it. Here's the thing: vulnerability is the first conversation. Before you do that, you got to unpack your invisible backpack. So your invisible backpack, all your past experiences, and I'm talking whether it's workplace, relationships. I'm talking about the one with yourself as well, life, business, whatever it may be. And you might think you failed, you made a mistake, you effed up, all of the above. If you can turn that lesson into a blessing, you pull that out of your invisible backpack, you drop down that experience and say, most of us will look at the trauma, the stress, the heartache of it, and we feel an emotion we don't want to feel, right? Everyone, if I say what happened to you, they'll tell me, oh, it's something, I was abused, I was X, Y, and Z. And I'm not saying it didn't make you feel that way, or that you weren't, in that sense, the victim of somebody else's projections. What I am saying is, if you can flip that, and I mean this respectfully to the people that have been through abuse, we ask this question, what did you learn from it? And they're like, are you effing joking? What are you talking about? And I said, so do you've got kids now, do you do things with your kids to make sure they're protected in that space? 100% I do. And I said, so did you learn something that could be passed on to other people, so we can create a system procedure that allows us, whether you're walking your kids to go to the toilet in a public space, and you walk in with them or something, before you've let them walk in by themselves. There's a story shared from one of our clients who does this, and that, unfortunately, that kid was assaulted, molested, and killed within that toilet space. And while their parents waited outside, so what are we learning in spaces? And I mean that respectfully to that story and family, but that's the context and depth of this conversation. But what we'll do is we'll operate at a really low level. If you knew that's a potential, are you walking in that toilet? 100%. I'm walking in. Let's go. I'm going to walk in this toilet with you. You're going to go to the toilet. I'm going to stand at this door. And when you walk back out, I'm walking back out. I'm not going to apologize to anybody about making sure my daughter is okay, or I'm taking them to the disabled toilet. If no one's around, they can use that. I'll shut the door. They're in there by themselves, and I know that they're safe and they come back out. That's the depth and context to that conversation, my brother. And we just don't do it as a society. We operate at a really low level and we accept that. And then we get damaged and hurt by, and that, we're going to carry that for how long in our invisible backpack? Probably the rest of our lives. So how do we unpack that? What are the lessons that became blessings? And all of a sudden, and I'll talk on this depth level so people get a real understanding. That person had sat in that trauma for a long time, and recently they've reflipped that. They're actually crushing life because their perception correction, I call, has been one of a positive towards an outcome that allows them to become an advocate for that space. And the lessons that they learned from it make sure not only that, now they've learned 50 other lessons from other people, and they're starting to put together a really strong system that parents can protect their children. Does that make sense? And I'm talking in that space, let alone business, life, relationships, whatever it is, domestic violence we spoke about before. How much is it worth to have protection in that space towards people that might be victims? How much is it worth towards helping others make better choices so they don't become the perpetrator? It's priceless, right? So unpack that invisible backpack, take a step-by-step process to it, and understand that when you step in that space, you spoke about it, the imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call it, right? What am I doing here? There's all doctors, there's surgeons. I spoke at a conference, biggest conference I spoke at, and there's 3,000 people. A lot of them were doctors, surgeons, and so forth. And I'm like, what the F are you even doing here? But the common denominator, and I want you to think about this and everybody else, we're all human beings, relatability and authenticity. And if you can find that common ground, the titles don't mean nothing. It's the education, inspiration, motivation, knowledge that you share. We call it a message stick as Aboriginal people that had knowledge on it passed on to the next tribe so they could survive the best way they possibly could. And that's what we should be doing as human beings. Here's the knowledge stick. And those that say, I want to grab that and I want to learn from that, I'm going to take it, I'm going to plug it into my value, starts by you unpacking that invisible backpack and saying, you know what, I'm just willing to learn every single day. The only competition is me. And when I talk to NRL clubs, doctors, surgeons, I just think they're just another human being. They're not, Michael Jordan. They're not the leading heart specialist in the world. They're not. How can I relate and how can I add value to based around what I'm an expert in? And if you do that and you are constantly upgrading your skills, knowledge, listening, learning, reading, writing, etc., practicing, acting, people are going to say, "Hey, have you spoken to Jeffrey Morgan? His knowledge in his space is unbelievable." But if I go and try and talk heart surgery with somebody, now I've got myself in a position where, I'm not as good as them. I haven't had that many years of experience. You can gain a lot of experience by putting in the time, energy, and effort into the space to create the human you want to be, and valuable, man, priceless.
Give us the raw details of what it was like growing up on the block. What was it like at the time? Just
In,
that, to strip it right back, mate, to what it was right at the core.
it
Some
was like, it was dirty. It was, some places didn't even have doors, man. Like they were, doors off the hinges, windows smashed, graffiti in the house, outside the house. No food in the fridge, cockroaches, rats, syringes, crime as normal, domestic violence as normal, drinking alcohol, loud music. And imagine then going to school and a teacher saying, "You're not concentrating." I just think, and this is what that old seeking to understand. Like, oh man, I haven't slept. And my uncles and aunties were partying until 6 in the morning. And my uncle would walk past, and not joking, anyone that knows my uncle will tell you this. he'd slap me while I was sleeping, and I'd get up, my lip quivering, and he'd say, "You cry, nephew, and I'll give you another one." And it made, you're a man, don't you forget that men don't cry, and like stuff of that nature. It builds you a specific way, and over time you have to look at how you built and start to look back on, did it serve you? And as much as I was a proud Aboriginal man, it didn't serve me. And I moved out of there in 91 at the peak of it. And everyone got at me, you're this, you're that. But I just had to get out of there, man, because I knew that I didn't want to see our people buried. That, going through that life, as I said, the quality of life for us is, people down there, people getting buried at 40s, in their 40s, through their life choices, just bullshit, man. And running riots with police was totally normal. Throwing a brick at, I gave my nephew, asked me for money, and I was like, yeah, here's $20, take it, which was huge back then. He walks up to the shop, he comes back with a box full of food, and I was like, oh, how good's that? Like that was something I didn't expect from him. Anyway, police car comes down, he puts the box down, opens up the eggs and starts throwing the eggs at the police car. And then they go to get out, and all the boys start, breaking them to make sure they don't grab the young kid. And like, it was just insane. But he'd obviously seen our behaviors and had taken that on as an example. And that was normal. As I said, badge of honor to go to jail. And when I was 13, 14, we lost probably 4 to 6 people our age, 13 years of age, because heroin had just come out, to heroin overdoses. And a lot of those were girls. And you're like, we didn't even, I wouldn't say we didn't feel bad about it, but like, it was, you didn't have time to fuck. You didn't have time, man. Coppers are coming, question you're throwing up against the wall. You're dodging syringes on the ground, loud music playing at night, going out, people fighting, people, domestic violence, fights in the back lane, come out the back lane, let's fight. And as kids, we'd all go around and stand around, yeah, go smash him, smash him. Like, that was just normal behavior. And, I look at a 12-year-old kid who's playing with their doll, or playing, I don't know, some action figures, or some, I don't know, doing whatever they're doing at 12. I don't even know what they do at 12 because we didn't do it. Yeah, kids are going to school every day with lunch boxes. I went to school with nothing, $0, no lunchbox, no anything. Just went to school, and I hadn't eaten that morning, and I'd come back at night, and I'd walk around the community, and you'd smell a stew or something being cooked, and you'd walk in that house in hope they say, you want some food, son? And I'd be like, oh yeah. And then you'd sit there eating, and if they gave you bread, fuck, I'd eat the whole, I'd eat the whole loaf. Like, as much as I could, I'd put butter on butter, because I just didn't get it. And even when I started to commit crimes and so forth, Mac, as I said, was our best friend at that point in time. We were out late at night a lot of the time, so nothing would be open, and that would be open wherever you went. Um, cheeseburger meal, extra cheeseburger, 6 nuggets, sweet and sour sauce, hot apple pie, chocolate sundae with extra fudge. Saying I could still rattle that off, and I ate that relentlessly. It's something that still scares me to this day, because we ate, through those periods. The only good thing about that, I suppose, period was the fact that I got locked up so much, so I wasn't able to eat that food. And inside, I ate a lot of chicken, fish, good stuff, meat and veg type thing. As they provide, it was low quality, but at the same time probably saved me in the sense of, heart disease or something of that nature. But it still scares me to this day.
Just to give everyone a bit of a snapshot, the block, it's pretty much, would I be right in saying that it's the Indigenous home or spiritual home for a lot of Indigenous people?
Absolutely. And you found block, Aboriginal communities, you might have one here, there, and everywhere, like different. Say it was in the Northern Territory, New South Wales, you have different communities in different places. What Redfern was a hub where all communities came together. So you had people from Moree, Walgett, Taree, all these different places that came and became, a real powerhouse. Everyone would come down there, and you had the best of the best in the wrong way. going down there and just showing up, being ultra violent. And I watched the movie The Town once, and they said it's one of the most, whatever suburb that was one of the most notorious areas for the most bank robbers in an area. And I used to think at the time when that movie came out, I was like, oh, we'd challenge that, because we'd meet at the same thing. We'd meet at the top of Redfern and say, "Do you want to go and do a bank robbery?" Like literally, people would do that, or go and do some form of crime together to go and make money. And whilst people were talking business deals, that was our business. That was how we did business. And you'd sit there, same thing. You'd see drugs sold, whether it's hard drugs, light drugs. You'd see people, drug takers on the nod. So they'd be like this, or slumped over. You'd see people that were blind drunk, loud music constantly, glass everywhere, dogs that were mangy, cars that were, just hanging by the thread of their thing. You'd have racism, you'd have police brutality. It was just insane. The area was one of the most notorious streets in Australia's histories, for the right reasons. When I say the right reasons, I'm right sort of, what we'd done, we created that environment. And I was right up the front of that every single day when I was out. When I wasn't in there for the 20 years I spent in custody. But yeah, crazy to be able to come out of that and use those lessons that became blessings. Same thing, a lot of abuse to myself, a lot of trauma to myself. But if I live in that, I'll live in the emotions of that. And are they the emotions and feelings I want on a daily basis? No. So what were the lessons that became blessings? How did I turn that into power? And I turned that into a business, and a global business at that, and one that we're proud of. And it shows you, no matter where you start, it's how you finish, and how you use those lessons in your invisible backpack as blessings within your life.
So in the 1970s, the Aboriginal Housing Company, AHC, started purchasing land. I think it was like 1973. Now, there was a group of campaigners that lobbied the Whitlam government during this time for a grant, which enabled them to start purchasing houses. And this was around the time when a lot of protesting started to occur in the area, which you,
Yep.
you sort of discussed a little bit there, throwing bricks at cop cars and all that kind of thing. Um, were you there during the 2004 Redfern riots, or were you in prison at that stage?
I was in prison at that stage. That was my family. TJ Hickey, unfortunately, was yeah, whole heap of stuff around that. We'll leave that with the details of what happened and what didn't happen. Everyone's got their own version. Only those that were there that day will truly know.
He was getting away from a police car. Well, this is what I've read, and don't
mm,
quote me on this, but he was
yeah,
running away from a police car and he got impaled. Is that correct?
yeah, he got hit on the bike, and then that slung him and flew him into a fence and impaled on that fence, which ended up killing him. So
Uh,
but you got to ask yourself, like, to us, that's normal behavior from the police, where you get rammed by a police car for no reason, mind you. So he hadn't committed a crime for them to ram him. And mind you, like, even if he killed someone, I don't know, like, what's the procedure as a police, to ram a young kid on a bike? That was just normal to us, and that's what we accepted. So when I got picked up as a kid, I knew I was going to get belted, but that's why every time I threw that brick, I threw it as hard as I possibly could, because I remember how hard you threw a punch when I was handcuffed, with the handcuffs behind my back as a young 12, 13, 14-year-old kid. So, um, seeking to understand, sit me down and have a conversation, role model me into a better position that my parents didn't give me, would be the solution to that conversation. And policing to me is, definitely, instead of just policing and locking someone up, how about you give them the key to the jail cell? And what that means is they can walk out of that cell through the knowledge that you give them. And we've spoken about that plenty, and it's something I'm committed to, even working with. When I say this, I mean respectfully towards young kids getting an outcome, even if the police are involved in that scenario, to allow them to see a better future, or anyone within the community. With respect to, I just want to see people not go through what we went through. But you know, that's just total normal behaviour, and you can understand why. after everything that's gone through and come through, nothing came of it. And I read a stat recently for the Aboriginal deaths that have been in custody, whether it was like my cousins or anything of that nature. Only one person's ever been charged in the Northern Territory out of all those police. So you're telling me out of 50 or whatever it is, it's more than that. 50 occasions, nothing was untoward. It was just all, like to me, and it's just normal. We grow up with that and we just go, it is what it is. And hence why you got so much anger coming out of a space. And when you don't know how to regulate your emotions, you're going to throw a brick, and that's how you regulate your emotions. When you get to learn how to do that and say, that's on them, let them be that of that nature, we're going to conduct ourselves this way. And that's what we did with Redfern. We went from the most notorious violent streets in Australia's history to, you wouldn't even notice it. You go down there and it's painted white and green. So back in the day, graffiti everywhere. There's still houses. If you walk down Everly Street, there's some houses on the right-hand side that are smashed up, you know, burnt. People had houses with burnt roofs, the whole lot. Like, it was insane, right? So if you look at those houses versus the old and the new, two different versions, and that's us as a community stepping up and seeking to understand from ourselves why we built this way. So even if the police throw us up against the wall, pat you down, and it was classical. I was boxing the other day in Mundine's, which is at the top of Redfern's, at top of Redfern, and crime's changed there. Like the Everly Street's not that, but we had, while we're boxing, you got people, students walking up and down, and then as soon as two black kids walk down, police that were sitting there jump out and, hey mate, what he's up to, and empty your pockets. And I was like, this is bullshit. And like, it's clear. And if I'd filmed that in time lapse, you would have been able to see that action go. It was 500 people that walk by and two Aboriginal kids come down and now you pull them over.
Yeah.
What type of relationship is that? They did let them go pretty quickly, which was good. And I've sort of just watched the interactions. Those kids, no doubt, because we've taught our community, just cooperate. Don't worry about it. Let them do their thing. If you got nothing to hide, you're not going to have to worry. Don't run off. Don't give them hell. Be able to handle that. No matter what they say, your kind is this type of people. That's on them, and let them do that. And hopefully, someone in the right time and right space will teach them how to conduct themselves, and you'll get a better outcome out of each human involved in that environment, no matter where that is, workplace, relationships, teammates. It's up to that person to heal themselves, fix themselves, if you want to call it that, but build themselves into a better human. That's what we do, build better humans through better choices, and it's been powerful.
And so the Pemulwuy, I think that's how you pronounce it.
Project. Yeah.
Pemulwuy.
Yeah.
So
do you know who that is? Can I ask you that?
It's got something to do with the Bidjigal warrior, 18th century. Is that right?
Yeah, so he was the first warrior that stood up to the settlers coming in. For anyone that watches this isn't me telling you something that I want to tell you as an Aboriginal person. The settlers' journals, so when they came into Australia, they wrote out everything they did, Captain Arthur, Philip, Cook, and we've now got those journals. They're factual. You can watch Australian Wars and you'll get to see exactly how Australia's history rolled out. We first landed, this is what the natives did, X, Y, and Z. We shot kids, we shot mothers, we raped, we done X, Y, and Z. It's all good. The Queen knew about it, and it's not me being angry, it's me just sharing facts. Go and watch a series. Rachel Perkins did that. Charlie Perkins, funny you speak about that movement. Charlie Perkins was one of those that was highly involved in those movements, and he was actually one of the people that first flipped me. And he said, "Son, you think that brick you throwing out the police car carries a message?" And I'm like, "Yeah, shows them who's boss, f them and f the world, you know." He said, "Son, you want to do something good? Get in a space where you can change the policies, procedures, strategies, and be of influence, be a leader by making better choices." And I'll never forget that conversation, and it's something that I've taken on. And funnily enough, Rachel ended up doing that series. So anyone that wants to watch the true history of Australian history, go back and you can access those journals yourself. I'm pretty sure through the Australian.
Can you, if you got a link to the documentary, can you
Yeah,
text
yeah, I do.
me
I
and
do.
I'll put it in the show notes so people
Yeah,
can have a
and
listen.
it's worth learning because people don't know who Pemulwuy was. Pemulwuy was the first warrior that stood up for women and kids that were being shot and killed. Like there's a story on there. We walked up and shot the woman in the back of the head, playing with her kid on a beach.
Mm.
Yeah, like, and we're not saying that. We're not saying. Imagine I did that at Bondi Beach, and I'd be the monster of Bondi. Yet now we put statues up of these people that were realistically probably serial killers, and that yeah, and it's not a take race out of it. It's not a race thing. It's a human behavior thing. If we treat somebody like that in this day and age, you'd all call me the monster of Bondi. Yet when it comes to as soon as we say, oh, it's an Aboriginal, here's what happened to the Aboriginal people, people go, oh, F that black people. What about just human, but how would we like to treat each other as human beings? Love, kindness, empathy, respect. You can find that in the Australian War series, and you can sit there. And when people watch it, they come back and go, Morgs, I was crying. I can't believe I was jibbed with Australian history. We were taught, most people will tell you who Hitler was, but they won't know who Pemulwuy was. Yet Pemulwuy is the greatest version of a true warrior in the sense of being. You want to talk about gladiator and being inspired by Russell Crowe. Imagine being Pemulwuy who actually did it in real life, standing up for a culture, people, women, children, and then having his head cut off and never been returned to Aboriginal people or his family taken to England. So it's just we can do better as human beings. Understand what I just said? We can do better as human beings, not as Aboriginal people or white people or black people. I don't buy into none of that. I never will. Even you said at the start of the show, I wouldn't personally say that. I'd just say I'm a human being, and how I treat Hayden or the next person tells me about who I want to be around. You want to call me a black so you're not the person I want to be around. And I wish you all the very best in your healing. Those that do want to watch that series, hit me and say, hey, Morgs, I watched that show. Unbelievable, man. And it's not what Rachel, I'm going to write what Aboriginal people think. It is actually the journals of those that first landed here, and you'll be blown away and saddened by how bad it was. And I think, the fact that the Queen knew exactly what was going down, that was a whole different series. But, mate, yeah, it's, to me, Pemulwuy is something that when I step on that stage, and we spoke about it before, my brother, I'm excited by this opportunity that Pemulwuy gave me to step into this space. And I thank you, Pemulwuy. And I literally think about that when I'm going on a stage because that's, a powerful conversation that anyone can step into and say, what inspires you? What's your vision, purpose, and why? And what is your reason not to ever give up? And I look back on whenever I get tired, I think how tired was he when he was walking around trying to protect our people, run from the authorities at that point in time.
But talk us through now, because your life has gone on a very similar trajectory to what we've seen in Redfern.
Yeah.
You started with nothing and you went through those struggles. You went to prison for 20 years. Um,
In and out all my life since I was a kid,
yeah,
from 12 to 37,
yeah.
just in and out,
Um, when you were getting into petty crime, started to rob banks, I understand, we talked about this off air. Your mum, when you left home, she was an alcoholic, dad was abusive. So you ran away from home. You started to get into petty crime
Yep.
within, Redfern and in around the CBD area. And then how did you eventually get into, more onerous bank robberies and dealing with large sums of cash and getaway cars?
It's like proximity to anything in business. If I want to be around Mark Burris, maybe I'm going to talk about multi-million-dollar deals or businesses that really scale to get a good outcome financially for ourselves to set up the life that we want. The same thing when I got into juvenile justice centres, I was learning how to switch off car alarms, alarms within brick and mortar businesses. Um, yeah, do things a particular way that would make life in that proximity or that world easier for myself, get an outcome, more money, less detection, etc., etc. So for me, it was just being around other people that had acquired that knowledge, and that's the power of listening and learning. Unfortunately, it was destructive listening and learning, but it taught me a lot around business because in that world, every time I wanted to learn something, I'd be like, "What do you do?" And that, what do you do to that person? I turn my arms off. I come in through the roof. How do you do that? What do you do? How do? Yep, you get this way, you get that, you do X, Y, and Z. And I just went in, and that was my whole life. I was in survival mode. So each time I went into custody, my ears would prick when you talk about how to get a Porsche. All right, so that's how you get a Porsche. How do you, and then it leads to one thing leads to another. And I think I was making so much money.
How did you steal a Porsche? Can you talk us through, like, I know on air,
Yeah,
how did you actually do it? Is it like you break through the front window, get into the keys, and like what?
yeah. So back at there's two ways. Firstly, we learned how to you'd smash the little quarter window back in the day, which was up the front. It was sort of like this, and use a little spark plug, walk past and go like this, crack. You put your hand in, bang, undo it. They didn't sort of. It depends if it had an alarm. Then we learned to turn the alarm off if it did have one. But in general, you turn it. It's just a little circular thing. You get in, you screw in a dent puller, and then that dent puller near the ignition, you'd have to do that because the angle was such a same thing. You had to get good at perfecting it because it was a weird angle. And if you did it wrong, the screw would snap, and that was it. You'd wreck that whole Porsche or being able to get that Porsche. You'd screw that dent pull in, bang usually one pull, and it would pull a whole ignition out. We learned over time to put the ignition back in, but without the teeth, so it just sat there, so it didn't look like it had been stolen. With a big gap in it, it would actually still have the key in it. You could park it anywhere, and no one would be suspicious. Clean out the window, but over time, we end up using just a little tool, and you'd be able to stick it down the door, and the same thing, click, and it would just open the door. And then we didn't have to smash the window. Even it was, same thing. Over time, I don't laugh in a bad sense. But I think about there was a stage where Porsche actually had a meeting, and we were able to meet people in that industry, obviously borrowing those at the time where they were interested in that. That's probably the best way of putting it. And I mean this respectfully when I talk about it, but I want people to get context of how deep we were. We're sitting in this Porsche meeting at Porsche, and they're talking about these Porsche feeds. We've installed this new thing. They're not going to be able to work it out, and we're sitting in that actual meeting. And I remember sitting there smiling, thinking they don't even understand what's coming because we sat in that meeting. And they said, "What we're going to do is you got a button under the carpet, and then you do X, Y, and Z to start the car." And we were sitting there going, "Too easy." And we went back out, and now all the new models that had come out, we knew how to actually start them from the get go. They must have been scratching their heads going, how did they work that out? But pretty much from the get go, we knew how to do that. And that's that conversation of being in proximity of people that could put you in the right places, but also then gain that education and knowledge that you can then apply into the world. And unfortunately, back then it was destructive. And as I said, so people do get context and understand what you have to laugh, like smile about it when you look back. You look how crazy they're trying to tell something and do something, and we're sitting in amongst that meeting with a whole bunch of Porsche business owners and so forth. And we got that insight because we're in proximity to the right people. And if you apply the same thing to relationships, financials, business, life, you're going to get a really great outcome really quickly. Do yourself a favor, surround yourself with the right people who elevate you into a space that gets an outcome. For us, that was, we went out that night and were able to apply into the world. And if that's your health, how much is that worth? If it's your wealth, how much will it get you? If it's your happiness, what life will you live? Those sorts of questions ask yourself. And don't be afraid to invest in somebody. So that means, how much does this cost you to get into your coaching program? It's not a cost, it's an investment that makes you a better person, that gets you to somewhere where compression of time, 20 years worth of knowledge gets compressed and put in a space where within a month you become a whole different version. and the life that you truly want on the other side of that. And that's magical. And I only share these stories so you get context and understanding.
When you say the proximity to the right people,
Mm.
um, Mark Burris on his podcast Straight Talk, you were talking a bit about the psychology of crime. And now when we're in life, we generally gravitate towards people who are very much on our wavelength or who make us feel welcomed or like a sense of belonging. And for me, the more I think about it, it's inevitable. You know, you talked and bless his soul, Russell Manser, who we're dedicating this episode of the podcast to, who was on episode 29. Um, Often talked a lot about how he was treated by prison officers, how he was treated by police. Um, when you go into prison as a notorious bank robber, you had a high level of respect, I understand, for what you're able to pull off. Now, when you go into prison or incarceration and the people there welcome you in with open arms, you know, they respect you, they like spending time with you in there, you build that network of brothers. Um, when you come out of prison, it must feel like there's something missing in your life. You know, now you don't have the same opportunities with work. You can't travel. There's all these limitations on you now, and it's makes clear sense to me now why we have such high recidivism rates where people go straight back into incarceration because they don't have that sense of belonging. How did you unshackle your mind in order to flip the script so that you became comfortable
Mm.
being outside of prison again and reestablishing new networks and connections with people that were completely different, subordinate to those that you had in prison and through robbing banks and car theft?
It's a great question because like Spanion on his podcast, big shout out, big respect to Russell Mentor. 40. He went through a lot of trauma. He was battling a lot of demons. I'm not going to speculate as to, it's not my business. We already spoke about that. May he rest easy. He was trying his best to, and he inspired a lot of people. He might have damaged just as many as well. I'll take the positives and I'll run with that. And may he rest easy. Big shout out to him. Spaniard spoke about something. He goes, Morgs, one of the things I remember being in the yard, if, you would talk about one person, who would it be, or something in a pod, who was, I don't know his term, I can't remember on the podcast.
Yeah.
It was the Prince of Thieves or whatever it was. And a lot of the boys said, it was Morg. So I never spoke about myself, my actions. And this is what I'm telling everybody on this: your actions create reactions, even when you're not even in that space. People are going to talk for you rather than you having to talk for yourself. And there's something recently someone said, Morgs, you don't have to go out like the rest of what they said is the influencers and say that who you were, they're going to do it for you. The thing with that, as you said, I come out then and now you like you're a movie star in jail. It's like, there's Morgs or there's so and so, and you know who's who in the zoo, right? When you come out, that doesn't exist anymore unless you're in Redfern. And I moved out of Redfern, so now I had nobody behind me. But what I did do was, in jail, you make $60 a week at the most. So I was a Koori delegate, which meant if there was a problem with any of the Aboriginal inmates, they'd call me down to that pod. I'd, what's up? How can I help you? Etc. Etc. Even if it was different races in there, and I built good relationships, so we all got on. We didn't have to stress about someone doing something bad to us when we weren't looking, or sneaking up on us. When I came home, I said, if I'm got my thing, I did this when I was in jail. If I've got $60 in my pocket on a Friday, and that is my payday, in my pocket I've got a roof over my head, which I always wanted, water that I could drink, a nice warm bed, and that $60 in my pocket, then life's good. And if then I end up with a car, and so I was abundant with the minimal basic fundamentals, which I never had as a kid proper. I had safety, security, and stability, which I never had as a kid. And anyone in a relationship, any woman tell me I'm wrong. Safety, security, and stability in your relationship. Any one of those go missing, you become unstable and feel stressed. And who wants to be in that? Oh, I don't know if this bloke's cheating on me. So I didn't have all that, but I went, I can get all of that if I just say I've got $60 in my bank account, and I'd rather be outside with that $60 than inside with that $60. Well, I don't know if someone's going to sneak up behind me and put a knife in me. And sometimes just for being a particular race, if you went to a jail and there was a majority of a particular other race, they were trying to dominate the smaller bunch of yourselves. And it happened many a times where, you're fighting for your life. I'm not even joking when I say that. Like, imagine fighting for your life. I'm talking about you're getting put in the Colosseum, and you better show up and have a crack at life, because you don't even know if you're going to walk out of that yard or get carried, or literally be flown out of that yard in the care flight helicopter, getting you to, critical emergency down at the hospital to fix yourself, intensive care. So to be able to say, I'm going to be content with $60 in my pocket, roof over my head, safety, security, stability, that was how I flipped that. And if we can start to become abundant of the mindset around what we already have, life, vision, hearing, opportunities at life, there's so much out there. We're abundant in knowledge. Then life will be magical. And the thing I definitely knew was knowledge was power. Knowledge isn't power without application, because we live in a world where knowledge is abundant. You can go to Harvard scientists or Harvard professors that as a kid I never got, you never got, even in Double Bay, you wouldn't have got that unless you went to Harvard. We can access that in real time. Like literally in my email list is all these universities sending stuff. There's no way I would have got that as a kid unless I had some good money. I was dreaming, and if you can be abundant from the get go and then step into the opportunities, that's how I stepped out of the life that I didn't want and into the life that I truly wanted. And most of us, people might look at my life and go, "Fuck, that was crazy," but I'm going to tell you something. It's crazier that you sit in a life with so much opportunity but never take it because you're the prisoner of your own mindset. You're in prison every single day, and you're going, "Oh, I wish I could do that. I'm not going to do that. How's my hair look? How come Hayden's got that car? I should have that car. Oh, I wish I had that dog. Oh, I've only got this little dog." Don't worry about anyone else's life. Start living your own life and be defined by it. And that's what I did before I came out that last time, and I flipped my life. Knowing that $60 outside is better than $60 inside, and you've got to know what you've got and the opportunities that are sitting away. But knowledge isn't power until you apply that information in education. So the application of the life you truly want sits behind the actions that you take to create the reactions you want within your life. Priceless, man. Priceless.
Talk us through some of the most precarious police chases you had, as you were notorious for being one of the best getaway drivers. I understand you did a lot of planning the night before. You took the route in a car,
Absolutely.
for the journey, but just talk us through maybe one of those most hairiest instances.
Oh, absolutely. Like we used to drive over to Gladesville Bridge, and you'd come from Lane Cove, and it was a left-hand bend. And by the left-hand bend, this is going to sound crazy to people. This is reality. You'd be trying to be up at about 260 Ks through that bend. And then going up the hill, trying to maintain 260, if not climbing towards 270. And then as you go over the top of that hill, the idea was to get up to 300 Ks an hour. And that was the reality of our life. It was an insane life. And hence why police sort of said, there's no point in chasing them. And we got, we drove a loop from Redfern through MacDonald Town, Erskineville, back to Redfern. It basically goes around the train tracks. And, you get a car and you time yourself around that lap, and then you pull up and you let the next person do it and find out who could do it quicker. And I don't share this to be, what's the word, promoted or anything of that.
It's your reality, though.
It was the reality. So you get context of where we came from and how deep that was and how far I've come. They put speed humps around that whole area. They changed the whole route, and there was speed hump after speed hump. It's the worst thing ever. Now I look back on it, I think they created these speed humps because of us. Now I'm hating it because I every time you go over. But like, you look at some of those things, and some of those chases, we got chased across the Harbour Bridge and they blocked the road, and I went across the medium strip at full speed. And that medium strip's probably this high concrete, and how that ended up, if it slung us in the air and there was a car coming the other way, which there were many of, and we lost control and slammed into somebody and killed it, and it's happened many a times with other people, then it's crazy. Like the amount of times, 300 Ks, mate, you lose control and you clean up somebody coming the other way. They're not surviving, you're not surviving, and it was reckless as anything. It was just crazy, and I look back on it, and I'm I'm blessed to be here. And how can I give back for all that I've done? It's not me saying I owe something. It's me just internally, innately saying I've got more in myself, and I want to share that to the world. And organically, I'm just giving back as best I can. And for me, that's the only thing I can do as a contributing member of society. Go back and look at those crazy times. You look at jail fights where my brother got stabbed in the ass on one side of me, and the other brother got stabbed in the head beside me, and I was in the middle of those two. What if that person just sees me for a moment, sticks me in the neck and hits an artery, you bleed to death, and your game's over. And it happened to many people in jail. And that, like, these, John Killick's escape, that was probably, I was the closest person to that chopper, and I held the door for Johnny to come out, not knowing what he was doing. He's saying, Morgs, don't let that door shut to the oval, because it was an electronic door. Once it locked, he wouldn't have got out to the oval. I was on the phone. Can I use the phone, Morgs? Yep, sweet. Jumps on the phone. We get to the door. Don't let that door go, Morgs. So I had to, and the officer's saying, let the door go, Morgan. And Johnny ended up coming out. Thanks, Morgs. Little did I know he'd probably just rung up his Lucy at that point in time and said, we're about to fly out of here. Like, they probably had their own little code. Walk out to the oval, playing footy. Chopper lands on the oval. Johnny jumps in. And I'm like stunned myself. I'm like, what the? When he jumped in, he walked over. I still tell him, and he doesn't even remember. He undid his jacket and he just threw it like, blow this joint, jumps in the chopper. Officers didn't even move towards the chopper when it landed, which was crazy. The officers that were on the oval, they just sort of sat in their seat. It was only when Johnny jumped in, they started running over, get to the door. Johnny sort of scares them off, I believe, in a sense, in a way. And the tower and the chopper, and my head's in between those two. And obviously it's an elevated point, but they start shooting at that chopper. And you can hear the tink, tink, you hear the bang, 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 and it's so loud, high-powered, long-distance rifle, and they're firing down on it. You hear it tinking into the helicopter, tink, tink, and you're expecting for it to blow up, or, you see the movies where they hit the petrol tank and it blows up, and the blades come off and chop your head off or chop you in half. Like, literally in that moment, you're thinking that, because they're just shooting, in my perception, recklessly. What are you going to do? Like, kill I don't know, maybe they were firing warning shots. I don't know. I've never read the book or anything of that nature from the prison officer's view, that shot. But you look back at all those moments in your life. Some of those things at high speed, I'm talking about fitting through gaps that were this thin on each side of the car at 260 k's an hour. And you get that wrong, calculation wrong in peak hour traffic or big traffic, mate, and it could have been more than one person. It's just insane. It's like, and to grow up and people go, oh, this bloke's crazy. We just grew up where that was so normal, and we didn't have someone who's probably judging me right now say, hey, sit down, young fella, 12-year-old kid. Let me instill some good habits, some values, some respect, some discipline that my parents didn't give me. So it's easy to say, the young kid was out of control and was a piece of work, but how do you expect something to function? And it's like me saying to you, that same person who judges me, I do it all the time when we get into these conferences. so do you know how to be, are you a millionaire? And they go, no. I said, so tell me about $1 million business. And they go, I can't. I said, so don't, when you judge someone, if you didn't have the role modeling, you're judging them on a level that you then have just done yourself. You've told me to go and be better, but you don't even know how to get to $1 million either. So you're judging me on something we both don't know until someone steps in that space. So if you're going to judge me, it tells me you've got the solution to the problem. Hey, Jeff, I've got the solution to your problem. Let's have a conversation. Yeah, why not? Love, kindness, empathy, and respect in this space. And now we've got a better outcome where that contributing member to the society doesn't kill someone, doesn't do something bad, or and someone's family is impacted by that, and our communities are affected by that. And that's something I'm passionate about, seeing these young kids. Alice Springs is a great example. They're on a curfew in a town. I understand, like, I think it's 6 to 8 p.m., no kids on the street. Unbelievable. It's like, or it might be even later. It starts with the role modeling. Those kids, do you reckon they're they're not going out there because they're Aboriginal kids and they're running amok? And mind you, there's Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal kids in amongst that, but it's because just whatever reason, whoever those kids are, they haven't got the role modeling or the education to build their prefrontal cortex into a program of better choices, discipline, emotional regulation, etc., etc., etc. Yet then we say to those kids, just like yourself, be a millionaire. It's impossible. They don't know how. They've never seen how to act good in that sense. So the same principle around being a millionaire, when you understand that conversation, you can say, actually, maybe I can contribute some time towards one of these young kids and actually start to build values in. And that's how I changed. One of the first changes was a bloke named Macca. Big shout out to you, Mac. I don't know if he's still alive. He was a big islander in Yasma. If you're out there, reach out to me. I'd love to say thank you to you, because he said to me, come do some weights, boy. And I was like, I don't do that bullshit. And, young kid, egotistic and all of the above. I control me. You don't tell me what to do. He goes, all right, do some push-ups. I'll do more push-ups than you, I bet you. And the old me came out. He spoke my language. He got on my level. I said, I'll bet you. And we did push-ups. I don't know. I'm pretty sure he won anyway. Long story short, he spoke my language. He got me in there and he said, try the bench press. This is how I got stronger and you can do more push-ups. All right, then. And I did the bench press. And all of a sudden, he taught me a value. And when I did it, I went serotonin, dopamine. I started to feel good. Now, and those simple seeking to understand, speaking my language, coming down to a level where I understood the conversation and he gave me the solution to the problem, started to create a new version of myself that I'm forever grateful for. So, Mackie, if you're out there, brother, big shout out to you. I hope he's still a tank. He was an absolute beast back then. Animal. Big islander with just biceps the size of my head.
And all the Islanders stick with the Aussies and that in prison, don't they? The Islanders and the Indigenous.
Oh, you'll find that. I think, like, you'll get, in general, you have all the races: Islanders, Asians, Lebanese, Aboriginal. They're the sort of predominant groups within that space. And then you get the Aussies that sort of mix in. They'll go with themselves a lot of times, but they'll also mingle in. So you get boys from the area in Redfern, Mount Druitt, whatever it may be, anywhere across Australia, Mirrabooka, these places where they end up mixing in with Logan in Brisbane. They mix in with the Aboriginal community. So when they go in, I know Hayden, hey, Hayden, what are you doing, brother? And he ends up coming in with the Aboriginal group as such, versus those from Mount Druitt that might have an Islander friend and they end up in the Islander group as a non-Islander person. And for me, that was one of the beauties that I started to realise had a real skill, because I'd go over and I'd be able to talk to the Asians or sit with the Asians and eat, or talk to the Islanders and train, play sport with the Asians playing soccer as an example. I was the only non-Asian, even in Victoria, it was the same. And they're like, Morgs, you're crazy, because you don't know what could go down there. And it was how I
Only
treated
they
them.
love stabbing.
Oh, absolutely. And that, mate, I could have, they could have, and there was times where a kid I grew up with ended up being a part of the Lovers Lane. I might get that wrong. He was down at the eastern suburbs. He ended up killing a few people, an Asian bloke. But they all ended up stabbing him like, I don't know how many times, like ridiculous times, 100 times or whatever it was, 20, 50. And it was just crazy the fact that they even did that. And I'd put myself in those spaces. But to put yourself in that space, you better know how to effectively communicate and be respectful in that space, because it's their space technically. And then I started to merge myself in. And what it did, I'd bring another Aboriginal person into the conversation, and I'd bring another one. And then what we found is people started, I'd get them to see through a different lens. Oh, you know what? We don't have to look over our shoulders, and we can actually cook or play sport or get on with it, listen to music, train together, whatever it was. And it just created a better environment, less stressful. And there's many a times when I left the jail, it would blow up because you wouldn't have those that wanted to find that peace. They just wanted to rule the roost. And people got airlifted out of that jail, might not even carried out in a body bag. And that's the power I went. You've got something really special where you can communicate with people and get everyone to get on with one another, because we spoke one another's language. I spoke their language. I listened and learned and made sure that here's how I can present a better environment. Would that be of value to you? Yeah, it would. So all these, they were all lessons that you could use in business, life, relationships, whatever it was that I stepped into, financial freedom, and magical to do it at, get it wrong and it costs you your life. So now I operate from almost the same, not almost the same. I operate from the same level. If this goes wrong, it's going to cost you. So what I'll do is I'll be so strong with my foundation and framework. When I present that, you see the high value in it and you go, yes, I'll invest in that. And now I can give that to you. And now I can build the second level on top of that, third level, and so forth. And until I'm in the penthouse as such of education, inspiration, motivation, knowledge sharing. And that is of high value to any space that you enter. And most importantly, you don't get damaged.
You had two kids that came from a relationship which broke down prior to you spending big chunk of your time in prison. And then you went on to, in total, you spent 18 years in prison. You think about going through primary school, high school, you could do an undergraduate degree, do a master's degree. That's about 18 years of your life, right? So that's like that's my whole life. You spent a third. Any person out there who has lived generally the life expectancy, what is it, around 80 years or so at the moment, for males and females, somewhere around that ballpark figure. That's almost like a third of someone's life, a quarter or a third of someone's life in a good circumstances, right? It's probably a lot lower for Indigenous as well. What was it like, potentially like situation like you had with Macca, that flicked the switch? I know you're in the back of a paddy wagon in Melbourne after being arrested in your last bank robbery, and you broke down in tears in the back of the paddy wagon. So was that the moment where it really, the switch flicked for you, and you sort of thought, I really need to get out of this quick, smart, before it consumes my whole life?
Yeah, the breakdown happened more during the court case. When I first was arrested, it was a huge surprise. So I'm thinking, what evidence do they have? What can they prove on me? They can't prove anything. We got away with the bank robbery. They actually watched us rob the bank, and that old story scenario, getaway driver. We were able to get away really cleanly. But they knew who we were. They knew that we'd planned it. They'd watched us do it the whole lot. But for me, it was the sum of all efforts. So when I went to trial, I ended up crying in the back of the truck, going back to the jail. And I hadn't even been found guilty yet, but I was like, fuck, is this what you really want? Is this the life you really want? And I think that's where I started to really, and it was a sum of all efforts. I'd done a lot of education over that time in jail, so I didn't waste it. I was doing MYOB, business studies, all of it, anything that was going to help me be a better version of myself. And I got to a position where, there's another person, Rangi, big shout out to her. I think she's high up in the juvenile justice now, communities and justice here in New South Wales, I believe it's called. I think she's like the CEO of it, from what someone told me, or up in amongst that leadership group. And she teach me the value of, don't talk shit and be true to yourself, and these different conversations. So those, I didn't have all that role modeling. So I'd grab that from her. I'd grab the training from Macca. I'd grab this from another person, that from another person. Good fathers, good husbands, good community leaders. What were they doing? How were they doing it? How would they speak? How would they conduct themselves? And I was stealing all their superpowers as such. It was the best bit of stealing I ever did, I suppose. In that sense, people might have talked about hood superstar. For me, the best things I ever stole was the power of what someone had in value, and the knowledge that they shared to me. And it came around all aspects. And whether, you're sitting with Mark Bruce and we're talking about how to scale your business, what's your business about? You ever thought about it like this? Those sorts of things, they could be a 5-minute conversation, but if you're listening and learning, you plug that in. And I think it got to that point where I hit a threshold, or I think I hit that threshold in the back of that truck and went, fuck, is this going to be your life? Is this what do you want to just keep doing life like this, or do you want to be free? And why couldn't you do what everybody else does? You've got so much determination, perseverance, commitment, the discipline about that 12 years I spent with my father that's still present. What if you showed up to a different way of life? What would happen? And I was like, fuck, everything would happen. And what would it feel like? It would feel like it would be unbelievable. So I pictured all the moments I'd spent illegally with illegal money doing great things, but why couldn't you do that with legitimate money around something that's greater? What are you great at? And then I went, become a nutritionist. So I love training. I'll be a training nutritionist. And went into that world. 216, brother commits suicide. 218, sister commits suicide. And I sort of I've been thinking about getting away because I was in there 5 to 9, consumption of time versus money. Was I being as effective as I could be towards other people, sharing that knowledge to help them step out of that heartache, pain, suffering, whatever they labeled themselves as. And then I went, instead of impacting one person in there, I can impact 300 people, less time, more money, no brainer. And I started to move away from into what we see today, that global 7-figure business heading towards 8 figures. And we'll hit that this year, and we'll do. And it's not about the money. It was never about the money. It was about the passion and value I brought to a space that helped people trust that. And they wouldn't have trusted the young kid back in the day, that's for sure. It's not how you start, it's how you finish, and what you build into yourself, the belief. And to build that belief, you got to, those elements, as I said, the sum of all your efforts lead to who you are today, whether it's the education, the knowledge, the application, the slowing it down, self-reflection, understanding yourself, which means not understanding yourself, understanding how you're built. Is it serving me? Because you can say, oh no, but I'm comfortable in this job and doing so forth, as I said before. Well, you're ever going to get your kids to Disneyland? No, I won't. Would that be of value to you? Yes, it would. What would you perceive as the first step towards making that happen? And I say to people, what about if you could save $100 a week? By the end of the year, have 5,000. If that doesn't get you in the first year, maybe it's the second year. You got $10,400. I'm sure that will get you to Disneyland. So being able to do that in that sense and show people breakdown of life, because we don't sit down and pause for a moment. We're too busy, don't have enough time, don't make it a priority. And those three things lead to us just saying, I don't, I'll accept average, I'll accept this life. This is where I sit, and I'm content and at bliss with this. There's more to life than being in average. And that the back of that truck, all the summer things came together, and I hit that threshold. And I heard Ant Middleton speak about this, and we spoke about this at the airport. And I actually told him this. Someone asked him, do you feel bad about killing people at war? And he said, there comes a time where there's a threshold where someone's shooting bullets at your head, and it's you or them, and you either fight back or you run off, and there was nowhere to run. So you got two choices. And I think that's where I got to in the back of that truck. I got to a choice where I started to think about, you're going to take yourself out. And I didn't really think about taking myself out, but I was saying, die in jail. or you're going to make something of your life. And I decided to make something of my life, and I accepted that I wasn't going to be the smartest, I wasn't going to be the prettiest, I wasn't going to be the most well known in the room anymore. And I was comfortable and cool with that. Most people won't do that. I want to be the person who's valued and cared for and loved for and up the front and the highest on the stand in front of everybody else. We all sort of want that underlying in a sense of feeling good about ourselves, not actually being the number one top dog, just feeling good about who we truly are aligned with ourselves. And that's where that misalignment came together with the sum of all things. I started to realign myself, and man, life's been just mind blowing. And oh yeah, we share that every single day on our social media. People say, Morgs, I wish I had your life. I'm saying, why don't you feel that you can't have that life? And it's our limiting perceptions, beliefs, values that put us into a set mindset. And until we shift that mindset, we'll always be set in our ways. And there's more to life than who you are now. I can guarantee that.
One thing I would like to ask you, Morgs, would be, do you have any major regrets? We understand your mother passed away of cancer in her 50s, and you went to her funeral in cuffs.
Yeah.
Your son,
Sorry.
one of your son who's now, studied commerce at uni, and you don't really have a relationship with him. You don't chat with him. So can you maybe talk us through some of those potential regrets you may have with some of the crimes you've committed and the time you've served in prison, and what's that what it taught you about yourself?
I think one thing that's important, and mind you, I regret hurting anybody in any situation. Let me make that clear to every single person. I regret that somebody was affected by my actions, not only in crimes, in relationships, in how I conducted myself. But I have to say this, and it's like people get an understanding around this, because this is how deep of an understanding I have of myself. I can't act from a space I don't understand. And I don't mean to justify my crimes, but as a 12-year-old kid, I just wanted food, shelter, safety, security. And I went on the streets of Sydney and I went, well, how do I get that? And I climbed to this canteen, there's boxes of chips there, and I opened up the chips and I get a packet of chips. I didn't even think I was stealing. So I don't mean that justifies it, but what it means is when I look back on things, and a lot of this is for everybody, when you're not equipped with the behaviors that will help you make a better choice, I am regretful to hurting people, taking money, damaging people's emotions, etc., etc. But at the same time, you got to look back and say, I just wasn't equipped to make a choice that was the right one at that time. And so you get $1 million and you spend it, you buy that Lamborghini and buy a house back then, and you got no money left, and now you're borrowing money for the fuel. Like I said, it's because you didn't have the right advice to invest that money. So if Mark Bruce was there and you gave him the million, he'd invest it totally different to what I would, because $1 million, I'm going to buy that Lamborghini and look good. Shit, I can't even afford the petrol next week. It's stupid, right? So it's hard to beat up on a kid or person that was uneducated in a space. And people go, oh, yeah, but you should have known better. Well, I didn't, because I didn't have anybody to tell me the difference. And when you're a 12-year-old kid, your thoughts are, I just need to get food. And when I swear I sat in that canteen, not once did I ever think we're doing something illegal. I'm just thinking, how good's the food? I'm glad I got food in my stomach. And when we understand that conversation, it will never justify what I did or what someone does, but it does get us to go, I understand why they're making a choice around an uneducated choice that they think is the right choice for them at that point in time. Sorry, a fly just landed on me. An uneducated choice, you just can't make a better choice when you're uneducated about that space that you're in, period. And whether it's in a sporting sense, whether it's in a relationship sense, whether it's, you get around boys that aren't men and they don't know what respect is, values, morals, and then we get them into a relationship based on an attraction. What do you reckon they're going to do when they see another girl that they're attracted to? They don't manage their emotions and they don't have the emotional IQ to make a right choice. You're going to go and cheat. And I'm not saying that I justify that. I'm just saying we're expecting, you buy a Datsun and you go, why isn't it going like a Ferrari? You're dreaming. You're dreaming. You've got to understand what you're dealing with. And same thing in business, Mark Boris would back this up. You're trying to invest in someone who has no framework towards a business, you're going to lose your money. It's a stupid investment. And the same principle around anybody in that life. And it doesn't, once again, I'm not justifying my actions. I do regret hurting people and traumatizing those in any way, shape, or form, not only in crime, but in relationships and in life. But I also have to look back and say that kid just didn't have that understanding. And if I could go back, I'd give that kid a hug and say, you did you got to think about what I actually did. I actually did a lot of entrepreneurial stuff as a young kid on the streets, and I did my best with the skill set I had, and that's all I can. It's a real hard conversation.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the next question I was going to ask you, mate, was if you could go back to that young kid when you were sitting up on the train going up to Newcastle for your first robbery you
Crazy.
had to do, what would you say? What would you say to that kid? What would be your
I'd
message?
say that you did your best. I'm proud of who you. Um, I'm proud of the efforts you did to be your best in the situation that you're in. And that doesn't once again say, oh, I'm proud of crime and F the world, or I just was proud of the 12-year-old kid that even traveled to Newcastle by themselves, and then got into and doing things to survive in the sense entrepreneurial mindset. And it was destructive. Don't get me wrong, it was bad. It was damaged some shopkeeper who had to come and pay for it and all of the above, which I'm sorry for and I apologize and I genuinely regret. But I am proud of the young kid that did his very best in that situation. And I've got to say, and I've gone back to a lot of spots. This is my own journey. As an Aboriginal person, the spirit that you carry, I wasn't sitting well with myself. So I'd go back to different places like Newcastle and say, I'm proud of who you became. And I'd cuddle that young boy and say, you've got the love now. And the love comes from yourself. You didn't have to come from an external. I spoke about that at the start. Of your parents or the community or anybody else. It's how much you loved yourself. But to do that, you've got to be able to acquire that knowledge and be able to understand the knowledge that's given to you. And speaking to a 10-year-old, 8-year-old kid to drive a car, they'll drive a car to a degree, but if you put them in a Formula One car, they'll die and they'll perish. So it's just right timings, right place. But I'm proud of that kid that of the actions he took. Tell me another 12-year-old kid that was that entrepreneurial. Now in this day and age, with and his proximity, now with the internet and social media, you got 12-year-old kids that are millionaires because they took the knowledge, or no, they had a passion, they applied that to social media. They were recognized, and now they took that knowledge into a space that made them millionaires. Same principle of me being a kid. I took that knowledge I had, and I went into being, the best I could be in that space. And I'm proud of that young kid for having a go and doing his best with the knowledge that he acquired. And at the same time, I'm regretful and apologise to those that I damaged on that journey as well.
Now you're the Biddigal warrior or the Pemulwai for the health coach or mental resilience and career
Absolutely.
development for a lot of people, a leader in the Indigenous community. Um, do you still? I know you're not connected with your son at the moment, but
Mm.
you had quite a large family. You had seven, I think, is that right? Seven siblings.
Yeah.
And one of your brothers you didn't meet until when your mum or and one of your brothers you didn't meet until your mother was passing away, dying of cancer. You want to tell us a little bit about that story? If you're still connected,
Yeah.
brothers and sisters,
Well,
uncles.
um, and we've lost two of those brothers, unfortunately. One recently, about a month ago, from lung cancer.
Sorry to hear that.
Another brother from a preventable health issue. He had an abscess and he was in hospital. And the old male ego signed himself out. I don't need this. I'm right. Went home and bled to death on his lounge room floor. But the brother you spoke about, mother had leukemia. She's probably years into her treatment, and she ended up writing out the family tree because had to do bone marrow and then test your blood and whatever else and see if it matched up and helped her. And she'd written out David, and I was like, who the F is David? I think this medication is getting to her,
Yeah.
you know. she ended up telling me, the aunties look at me funny, like, oh, I'll let your mum tell you. I ended up finding out I had a brother I never knew about. We find out through link up that we've got a number that we can contact him through. I ring him. He's in Tasmania. I ring up. I say, "Is that David?" They go, "Yeah." Oh, he's not here. I said, "How old's David?" They go, 65. I was like, "Oh no, wrong person." They go, "Are you talking about young David?" I'm like, "Yes." And they go, "Is this Jeffrey?" And I'm like, "Oh my god." So it was, they obviously knew at some point in time I'd come looking for my brother, and fly him up to Sydney. I'm heavily involved in crime at that point in time. I said, I'm going out, I'll be back. I'll see you in the morning. We go out all night. We get up to probably no good. I go to come back and pick him up, take him to the hospital to see his mum for the first time since he was adopted out. And I ring him up and say, mate, you ready? I'm coming in to pick you up. And he goes, oh, hi, mum, how are you? The police are here looking for Jeffrey. I'm going to head down to Arnie's house where I was going to go, and I'll meet you there, mum. And I was like, what the heck? So the first meeting and encounter, I meet him, I dump him at my house. This is how toxic I was. My own brother, I didn't stick with him. I go out and commit crime. I come back that morning to pick him up. Police are there raiding the house. He's up against the wall, and they're tossing the house upside down. And that's his introduction to his brother. Pretty crazy, and and it was normal. I didn't even think nothing. I was like, whatever. And I go, don't worry about him, bro. Like, stuff him, and that sort of attitude back then, and just shows you how, and that's why if we don't seek to understand why people are built that way. And I was just a young kid in survival mode that went into, now I've got to be violent to protect myself when I'm in custody. And that violence, remember, if you got violence here, when you come outside and you got someone wants to mess with you, well, I've got violence and it's my first response. I'm cool with that. Just know that I'm going to go to the end. And when I say the end, I'll take my life if I have to. And it's pretty crazy that we as humans get into that nature. Imagine we use that same, I'm going to go to the end, but in your business life, relationships, success, inner peace, happiness, priceless. Absolutely. So I just grabbed that quality and said, instead of being destructive or violent with it, let's use it in a constructive way. And I flipped that. And the brother, unfortunately, I haven't seen that brother for a period of time. He's someone who does Greenpeace, or like, goes into the forest and connects with traditional natives, I suppose. Or, it could be in the Amazon. But I haven't heard from him for a period of time, and I was actually thinking about reporting him missing to the police because it's been some time since he's got in contact. And as much as he's hippie and laid back, Byron Bayish, at the same time, I'd like to know where he is. And it's just been, me and my sister were talking about it at our brother's funeral. And he hasn't been active on Facebook, but he might be back in Tassie and just enjoying life. Just don't know.
Yeah. Thanks again for sharing a lot of those personal insights, say Jeffrey. And I know what we just spoke about there. A lot of that probably still hurts you a little bit. There's elements of your story where I'm sure you still, would you yearn to speak with your boy, and as you say, you
Absolutely.
worry about your brother who's gone missing. So thanks again for sharing all those stories. I know it can be hard at times. One of those people who has passed away recently, which I know is very dear to you, we spoke about him earlier, is Russell Manser. As I said to you, I wanted to devote this podcast to him. I know it's an association that you both your stories based a lot around is the bank robber identity, but you both did a 180 with your life, and you turn yourselves around. What you're doing at the moment is incredible, just as what Russ was doing to get money and support for victims of abuse and compensation for victims of abuse. So yeah, just want to, anyone who's listening who's either followed Russ for a long period of time or known Russ more personally. I know some of his friends and family have followed the podcast. Just want to send our condolences to him and his family. What were your best, fondest memories of Russ?
his shorts, definitely his shorts, because they always make me laugh. But yeah, man, I met Russ in 1991 in Long Bay Jail. I was 18 at the time, and Russ was wearing those shorts, but you could only wear green in there. But he wore these tight shorts that were right up his legs, and he had this blonde hair, looked like an absolute surfy out of Maroubra or something. Big shout out to the Bra Boys, Kobe, and all the boys out there. But yeah, I look at that and probably that, and look, as I said, some people, and you've spoke about it as well. Some people have Jeffrey Morgan chapter 5 in their head, and they're like, he was a piece of this, that, and the other. And I understand that, and I respect that, but understand that some people are trying their best to change and shift. And I probably was a lot further in that journey. Russ was only out for a shorter period of time. I seen he had a lot of demons and a lot of work to do, but one thing I share about Russ is the fact that he was willing. I had real man-to-man conversations with Russ. Say, listen, Russ, this is what's coming up, and this is, and I not in a stern way. I just say, this is what's coming up on a regular basis. It tells me that that's how you're acting, and if that's how you're acting, have you ever thought about why you act like that? Because I was that person. I remember I sought validation from other women in relationships rather than sticking to one. I said, I think, and I know you think it helps you on a dopamine serotonin level, you feel good and you feel like, oh yeah, I matter, I am valued, I am pretty, I am good enough, all that. I said, but realistically, it's damaged you on a life level. And I said, as soon as you stop taking that information or education and not applying it or trying to apply it, I'm going to step away from yourself. And one thing the reason why I stayed around Russ, I didn't know him outside personally. I never hung around him outside, other than recently where we caught up and did
videos
and so forth, because we're both in the same space trying to inspire people to greatness. But people that have been in custody or on drugs, but also people that are high flyers as well, that have got toxic behaviors. A lot of people, in that space, they can sit and judge our lives. Every Friday they're racking up on, as soon as, not even sometimes during the week, as lawyers, as doctors, as surgeons. I know that for sure because I've been in the room with these people. And I just look at it, and how negligent is that? You go into surgery and you've been on Ractinide, it's insane. But it's, and then people say, oh, you're a piece of work because you're bankrupt. Like, tell me the difference. It's all toxic behavior. But I look at Russ, and he was trying, and he did. He always listened, man, and he always said, Morgs, I respect you, and I appreciate the man. We don't do it enough as men. So if you're doing something toxic, Hades, and I say, don't worry about it. Yeah, high five, brother. You cheated on your wife with that blondie. Gives a high five on that, rather than saying, hey, brother, what do you feel you need to do that to your wife? What was the point of committing to your wife? How many men would have that conversation? We started that Primal Warrior group recently where 4 men, 200 years worth of experience, can hold you accountable and responsible to the words that come out of your mouth to build the integrity in life that you want. And that means commitment to yourself, and commitment to yourself means commitment to everything else. Your business, your partner, your dog, your kids, and I wasn't that. And I've taken that away, but and I passed that on to everyone in that space, including Russ. And Russ always grabbed it, and he was always improving. I'd say, he was crawling towards a better version of himself. That's my version of him. He wasn't running towards it. He was bettering himself, and he was crawling slowly but surely. And that gave me faith to stay in that space. So I'd always say, here's my next bit of advice, without saying, here's my next bit of advice. We'd hang out, shoot these videos, and he'd say, oh, Mom, so I never thought about it like that. And I was like, of course you didn't, because you weren't built like that. I wouldn't say that to him, but in my head I'd think that. And then I'd say, how would you apply that in your, what I do is this, that, and the other. And it told me that he was listening and trying to learn. So I'd stay in that space with him. And he's no matter what, I think looking back on it, he probably carried a lot of demons underneath. The projection was, have a crack a day, as you'd always say. But underlying, and the bright clothes mask the darkness inside. So, and it's something I want everybody to understand and remember us for. Don't hide behind those clothes, that mask of have a crack a day, have the the shiny clothes, the shiny car, the shiny house. Do that for yourself first. Work internally inside yourself so you understand yourself, and then the projection on the world, you won't care. And
Yeah.
that was one thing he did do well. He just didn't care. He wore those shorts. He wore the budgie smugglers with the cowboy hat. I'll never forget. And anytime I think about not putting myself out there, I'm like, fuck, if he can do that, why can't you do that? If Pamela could stand up when no one else would, why can't you do that as well? And use these strengths of people in that space. And he'll be remembered for me. I have that golden rule: don't open your mouth unless you're going to say something positive about somebody. I'll take the positives he taught me and I'll apply them into my life, and his spirit will forever walk this planet through the knowledge he shared and the lessons. Sometimes he didn't even say anything, it's how he conducted himself. But I said, hey, you know what? He put himself out there and he wasn't scared to jump on camera. That's vulnerability. Vulnerability is strength. And um, take those lessons, make them blessings, and may he rest easy. And it was,
Amen.
it's a sad thing. That anyone dies on this planet, no matter what they've done to other people, if they're trying to better themselves, and there's all and worry about your own life, not worry about. One of the worst things I've seen come of it probably was the speculation how he died and what he done. No one knows unless you read the toxology report, the coroner's report. You were there and you found him. It's all speculation, and I know the family hasn't shared that. They've shared something with me. I'll keep that to myself,
Yeah.
and the world doesn't need to know. I didn't ask for that information. They gave that up, and that's going to be in my. I don't need to tell anyone. And if anyone says, "Tell us more, what happened?" It's none of your business. And I didn't. I just was there to support the family. Here's what they told me. I'm going to keep that to myself, and may he rest easy. And let's take the lessons that become blessings out of the goodness he gave to the world on the back end of the life. That was, you know, it's easy to judge, people judge, but let me tell you, if you've been abused as a kid, not by one person, but by many people in a space like jail, and heroin was injected into yourself so they could take advantage of you as a young kid, 16, put into a jail at 18, you're not even meant to be there. So the authorities realistically, they let you down. Um, and if you are going to go there, you're going to put a kid there, put him in his own cell, not with people that were pedophiles and people that just took advantage of him. And no matter who you are, if you can't regulate that emotion, you're going to go and act out. And then on the back end of that, he's grown up in proximity to Mount Druitt, and you're not meant to be anybody. And the best, the war heroes, in his words, were those that came back from jail that were stealing Porsches, robbing banks. Or why wouldn't you want to become the next Robin Hood? And it's easy to judge people, but if you understand that conversation, let me put you in a war-torn area for a month and see how you come out stressed out to the absolute degree. That's how Russell was, and no doubt carrying a lot of that trauma and a lot of stuff he saw on that journey as well. And as I said, doesn't justify the crimes he committed or anything of that nature, but it does understand why people are the way they are, and I'm sure that that contributed to where he was when he died.
Yeah. God bless Russell Manser. And
Mm.
thanks, Morgs, for coming on the podcast, mate. It's been a pleasure chatting to you. Where can our
Legend.
listeners find you? The Jeffrey Morgan on Instagram. Where
Yeah, pretty much the Jeffrey Morgan everywhere. Just type in Jeffrey Morgan, Jeffrey. A lot of people put
yeah,
ERY,
yeah. So
and
Jeffrey
everyone does it. And
ERY, yeah.
I think they grab your thumbnail and they go, "Oh, it's Jeffrey," and they spell it right. It's Jeffrey. Type in Jeffrey Morgan, and you'll find me on Google. The website's up there, and if we can help any human be a better human, whether you're scaling your business, starting your life, finding inner peace, happiness, fulfillment, contentment, being a better father, being a better husband, being a better human to yourself, and the community in the world. The greatest race on this planet is the human race when we all get on through love, kindness, empathy, and respect. And I'm going to share that to the world and sprinkle that as far and wide as I possibly can until my last breath. Mate, thanks for having me on here and allowing us to share that knowledge to the world. And I wish you nothing but the very best in your episodes, and congratulations going past 21. And I love the fact that I was 33.
Thanks, brother. Before you go, I'll get you to add one song now to the Normless playlist. So we have like a collaborative playlist, and
Yes.
every guest has added one of their songs. doesn't have to be a song that you're listening to at the moment. It could be something that you had in your time in prison or back in the day when you were driving away from police officers after a bank robbery.
I think that there's a song that just came out this year, and I believe this is my
Yeah.
personal belief that it's one of the best songs ever written. It's called Madhouse by Taylor Hill. And it's sort of pretty iconic considering we just spoke about Russ, we spoke about my whole story, and it's just about getting out of that madhouse. And sometimes we think that you need to be in jail. Maybe you're a prisoner of your own mindset, maybe in a relationship that you can't escape from. And it's just one of these songs, his voice, his passion behind it. You can tell he's been through it and he sings it in a way. Madhouse by Taylor Hill. Big shout out to Taylor Hill. Have a listen to it. Tell me I'm wrong and drop me a comment around that song. Everyone that's gone across and I've played it to has that song on repeat, including myself. It's unbelievable.
Thanks, Morgs. No, that's awesome, mate. I'm definitely into those more sentimental songs where you can actually understand the lyrics. None of this, yeah, you can connect with it. And fantastic, mate. I honestly, I think we've gone for here almost 2.5 hours. So people are gonna have a big podcast to dig into over the coming weeks. So thanks for your time. Thanks for your insights. Thanks for your knowledge, mate.
Mate, I appreciate that the chance and opportunity. Just really quickly before we go, I was just going to bring that up for you all to finish off and seize off, but and you can sort of listen to a bit of just a song. I think
Buddy.
when it came out, Russ had passed away, so it was sort of yeah, I suppose. And you look back on the life I've had, and it was just an unbelievable song that really hit deep. And I think a lot of people, when you listen to it and you understand the depth of that song, the context, he goes through different levels of sort of voice, and it is just one of those songs, unbelievable. But hope you enjoyed a snippet of it. Go out,
Yeah,
listen to it,
sure,
let us
buddy.
know, and
Thanks. Legend.
wish
Thank
you
you,
all the
mate.
best in your journey to grow.
See you, boss. See you, mate.
Much up, brother.